Chapter 108. The reason why legends were so attractive was that bards understood people's preferences and natures very well. Of course, the stories they told were all based on real historical fact. Fabricated stories had no vitality. However, bards had their own unique tricks in telling stories. The most common one was to condense a story that happened over a long period of time, or even a year, into a day or a few days, regardless of time and space. For example, when the abyssal race was wreaking havoc on the Earth, the living space of the various races on the Earth's surface was greatly reduced. The huge underground city under the Holy Crown City was the masterpiece of the abyssal race. Vampires, black crows and other creatures were all remnants of the abyssal race. When the intelligent races on the Earth's surface were overwhelmed by the abyssal race, Abraham, the god of war, appeared out of nowhere and played an irreplaceable role in several decisive battles that determined the life and death of the abyssal race. Finally, he drove the abyssal race back to the underground. In legends, the experience of Abraham, the god of war, had been completely deified. Yesterday, he had just shown his talent by leading the army to defeat the invasion of the abyssal race. Tomorrow, he would begin the great counterattack. It seemed that Abraham had accomplished one miracle after another in a few days, but in fact, the war between Abraham and the abyssal race had lasted for 17 years. If Leger was also qualified to be the protagonist of legends, then his act of killing Thomas, the mayor of the 10th town, would be described by bards as a magnificent feat, or a brilliant starting point. Then, Leger would have the power not inferior to the 4 castellans. Tomorrow, Han Jin's small group would become the de facto master of the Biteman. However, in fact, the conflicts would not break out so quickly. Various forms of open strife and veiled struggle also needed a lot of time to prepare. Lang Ning had sent many messengers to the commanders and generals of Riptide with different contents. If it was the direct descendants of the Legion of Conrad, Lang Ning would focus on Leger's grief and determination. If it was the generals who were appreciated by Conrad, Lang Ning would shift the focus to the humiliation of the Knight of Conrad's remains. He would also say that a new funeral for the Knight of Conrad would be held in the near future, and he hoped that the generals would bring their people back to attend. If it was the generals who could be his enemies or friends, Lang Ning would spend a lot of time denouncing Rudolph's shamelessness and vigorously denouncing the 4 castellans of the Biteman for their evil politics. As for those who were destined to be his opponents, Lang Ning was too lazy to waste his energy on them. They were no longer children. Political conflicts could not be distinguished by simple justice and evil. Just like his opponents, they would not care about what kind of person the Knight of Conrad was. They would just do what they should do. It would take at least 7 or 8 days for Lang Ning's letters to be delivered to the generals. It would take them about a month to think it through and decide their position before they wrote a reply to Lang Ning. That was to say, the first step of the war would take a whole month to prepare. Han Jin and the others were living a very happy life. In Morrison's words, there was someone behind them. Leger was respectfully called the young marshal. He was definitely the uncrowned king of the 9th town. Morrison's often put his arm around Leger's shoulder, so there was no need for him to be afraid of anyone in the 9th town. Therefore, Moxink believed that he had the right and duty to fall into depravity. He would eat the best food and drink the best wine. As for playing with women, of course, he would choose the youngest and prettiest barmaid. Unfortunately, it often turned into a farce later on. Sylvia's sense of smell could only be described as magical. No matter how drunk Morrison's was in the bar, Sylvia would not appear. However, as long as Morrison's called the bargirls to accompany him, it would not take long for Sylvia to stand behind Morrison's coldly and make Morrison's suffer. In fact, when it came to this kind of thing, women had their own reasons and men had their own reasons. No one was right or wrong. After a few times, Morrison's learned his lesson. He only minded his own business and did not flirt with the bargirls. On this day, Han Jin and Morrison's went to a bar in the town. Han Jean just came out to relax, so he went back after sitting for a while. Morrison's, on the other hand, did not have enough fun and continued to stay in the bar. There were not many mercenaries in the 9th town. Most of the customers in the bar were officers from Riptide. There were not many locals. Because of the limited number of customers, the competition between the bars was very fierce, and the variety was endless. Now, several bargirls were standing on the tables, swaying their waists and lifting their skirts from time to seduce the officers below. The officers made a series of strange cries and jeers. Riptide's military discipline was very strict, but such things were not restricted by the rules. The fundamental desire of life must be vented, otherwise it would distort people's character. Those who forced others to eliminate their desires in the name of justice were usually despicable and shameless. They only asked others to do what they wanted, but they never set an example. Morrison's drank the last mouthful of ale, and threw a dozen silver coins on the table. He still had to practice his sword skills tomorrow, so he should go to bed early. At this time, an ordinary-looking middle-aged man in even more ordinary clothes stood in front of Morrison's. He smiled and said, "You're from Morrison's University, right?" "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" Morrison's looked up and down at the man. "Can I sit down and talk?" "Yes, sit down." Morrison's waved his hand. The middle-aged man sat down and said, "I heard that you're a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. I do like it that way." Morrison smiled. "Here's the thing. I have a batch of goods that need to be sent to 12th Town. I've been looking around the town for a while, but I couldn't find a suitable mercenary." The middle-aged man paused and said, "Can you help me?" "Don't worry. You don't have to worry about the commission. Just tell me. I'll satisfy your request as long as it's within my means." "You'll give me as much as I want? You're quite confident." Morrison's grinned. "Of course. You won't embarrass me on purpose, will you?" The middle-aged man smiled. "Don't you think you should introduce yourself before we talk about business?" Morrison said in a low voice. "My name is Justin. I'm the head of Biteman Morgan and Company." Morgan and Company. Morrison's almost bit his tongue. "Yes. Is there anything wrong?" Justin asked in surprise. "Nothing." Morrison snapped his fingers and signaled the barmaid to bring a dozen more ale. He sipped the ale and looked at Justin without saying a word. Justin wasn't in a hurry. He just looked at Morrison's quietly. "You want to send your goods from here to 12th Town, right?" "Yes." Morrison's thought for a moment and said, "It's more than 100 miles away. How about this? 200 gold coins." Justin was stunned. He smiled bitterly and said, "My lord, I just want peace of mind. There are no bandits on the road. Isn't the price too high? You think I care about this little bit of money?" Morrison's raised his thumb and said, "I'm just bored and want to go out for a walk. If I'm short of money, I can just ask Leger and I'll get as much as I want." I know. Justin was a bit embarrassed. In fact, he really wanted to say yes, but the price was too high. Although Morrison's looked silly and easy to fool, he would definitely be suspicious when he sobered up. "If you agree, we'll sign the contract. If you don't, you can sit somewhere else. Don't disturb me from watching the show," Morrison's University said casually. "My lord, actually, you don't need to send the goods to 12th Town. Just send them to Merlin New Village." "Merlin New Village? It's only about 60 miles away from 9th Town, right?" Yes. Then 200 gold coins is indeed too high." Morrison's thought for a moment and said, "How about 100 gold coins?" Justin opened his mouth, but what he wanted to say turned into a bitter smile. "Well, okay. But let me tell you first. I'll pay you 100 gold coins. No matter how many people you ask, I can only pay you 100 gold coins. Why do I need to ask for help for such a trivial matter? Besides, 100 gold coins is not enough to share. I can do it alone." That's good. Justin took out a cloth bag from his bosom, looked around, and carefully counted out 50 gold coins. This is your deposit. After you send the goods to Merlin Village, I'll pay you the rest of the money. We should sign the contract now. Morrison's rummaged through his clothes. It's okay. Justin smiled apologetically. No. Morrison's was surprised. I should at least write you a receipt, right? Haha, who are you? Why would you care about such a small amount of money? Besides, we'll have opportunities to work together in the future. Justin smiled. Well, okay. It's a deal. Justin stood up. My lord, my goods will leave tomorrow morning. Where should I wait for you? In such a hurry? Which gate will you leave from? The south gate, of course. I'll wait for you at the south gate tomorrow morning. Morrison's yawned as he spoke. Okay, then please rest early. Justin nodded repeatedly, and then said a few more polite words before walking out of the bar. Moxink lazily put away all the gold coins on the table. Then he raised his glass, put one hand behind the glass, and carefully looked at his image on the glass. He murmured in a very low voice, Great Moxink, do you really look so silly? Chapter 109. Early in the morning, when a caravan of more than 60 carriages approached the south gate, Morrison's came out of a roadside bar to greet them. He reeked of alcohol and his eyes were red. It seemed that he hadn't slept all night. Morrison's University, you're a man of your word. Justin poked his head out of a carriage and smiled. Nonsense. Who do you think I am? The Morrison's University representative said casually. He looked around and said, So many carriages? Your caravan is quite large. Ha! It's not bad in Ninth Town. Justin laughed. But it's not good outside. It's a second-rate caravan at best. Don't be modest. I've heard of Morgan and Company. If Morgan and Company is only a second-rate caravan, then there aren't many first-rate caravans on the continent. Morrison stepped into the carriage. But I heard that Dismark is jealous of Morgan and Company. He ordered to confiscate all the property of Morgan and Company. Is it true? Well, Justin hesitated and smiled bitterly. My lord, this is an internal matter of our caravan. I can't talk about it outside. I see. Morrison's laughed and changed the topic. What are you transporting this time? Food and clothes. Justin said seriously. The vampires invaded the Bite Man on a large scale. I don't know how many people they killed and how many villages they destroyed. Alas, a large number of refugees gathered in West Town. Castellan Winston ordered to buy food and clothes at a high price to solve the problems of the refugees. Haha, this is the Castellan's call. As merchants, of course, we have to support him. Aren't you going to send the goods to 12th Town? Yes, these goods are only prepared by one of our branches. Many other branches are also buying food and clothes. 12th Town is our rendezvous point. After the goods are sent there, we don't have to worry about it. Someone will take care of the goods to West Town. If only the merchants on the continent were as righteous as you. Morrison sighed. Many people look down on businessmen. They think that businessmen are all about profit. Justin showed a helpless expression. Actually, they are too one-sided. Our job is to buy low and sell high and earn the price difference. If we don't seek profits, then what do we eat and drink? If we starve to death, will anyone pity us? Yes. Morrison's replied casually. They don't know the pain of merchants. Waking up early and sleeping late, constantly rushing about, not to mention the hard work, you have to endure all kinds of pressure and threat. Justin smiled bitterly and said, My lord, you also know how chaotic this continent is. Our caravans sometimes have to pass through the territories of several lords in succession. If there is any accident, it will lead to disastrous consequences. No matter where we go, there must be a big shot to receive and take care of us. Otherwise, our belongings will be confiscated and our guards will be killed. This kind of thing happens all the time. Who can we go to? Hearing you say that, I'm suddenly a little worried. Morrison's lifted the curtain and looked outside. The caravan is too long. I'm afraid I can't take care of everyone. How about this, I'll go find a few more people. My lord, what are you worried about? Justin smiled. You only need to escort us to Merlin Village. That place is under the jurisdiction of Ninth Town. Within the range of Riptide's control, who dares to trouble you? That is fine. Moxink shrugged his shoulders. His expression looked normal, but he was cursing Justin in his heart. What a bully! He thought to himself. There was a skill in cursing. At least, one had to choose the weak points to attack. For example, if one cursed Han Jean as an ugly monster or Morrison's as a dwarf, would the people who were cursed be angry? Impossible. On the contrary, they would think that the person who cursed was mentally ill. After Morrison's told Han Jean and Sunir what happened that night, it was no surprise that everyone laughed. The merchant did not look for anyone else but Morrison's. He also intentionally or unintentionally discouraged Morrison's from seeking help from his companions. His intention was obvious. He thought that Morrison's was the most stupid and gullible. Now, Morrison's was trying to prove that Han Jean and the others were wrong, but the result was unacceptable. Therefore, Morrison's was now very angry. The consequences were very serious. The caravan was approaching the sentry post at the entrance of the town. The shouts of the soldiers came from outside. Justin smiled. My lord, it's time for inspection. Let's go out and have a look, lest those knight find fault with us. Okay. Morrison's answered in a low muffled voice. He lifted the curtain and stood on the shaft of the carriage. He looked forward and shouted, Who's in charge here today? Ah, it's the people from Morrison's University. A few knight hurriedly greeted him. Why are you here, my lord? When Leger killed his way into the camp, Morrison's had been fighting by Leger's side. In the eyes of the knight, Morrison's was very close to Leger's young marshal. Even the high-ranking officers personally promoted by Leger would not dare to be rude to Morrison's, let alone a small knight in charge of guarding the entrance of the town. I've accepted a business. I'm going to escort this caravan to Merlin Village. Morrison said, You better hurry up. Don't dawdle. I still have to rush back today. Open the sentry post. One of the knights shouted. He then smiled at Morrison's. My lord, you can go now. You're done with the inspection. Morrison's was surprised. He then shook his head and said, Do what you want. It's your right and your responsibility. Don't cause any trouble because of me. It's not good for me or you. My lord, there are dozens of carriages here. How many people do we have? How long will it take? The knight laughed. In this kind of situation we can just check 1 or 2 carriages. I see. Morrison's paused. You guys, go to the little widow's place tonight. I'll pay for all the drinks and entertainment. Don't tell me you don't know which little widow it is. How is that possible? Ha ha. The knight laughed together. The sentry post in front of them was opened. The caravan slowly drove out of Ninth Town. Justin sighed. My lord, you're so courageous. Usually, they'd have to stay in the caravan for hours. Is the 100 gold coins worth it? Morrison suddenly asked. Yes, it's worth it. Justin laughed. Maybe it was because he looked down on Morrison's that he didn't even notice the double meaning in his word. Morrison's realized that he was losing his cool. He laughed a few times to cover up his mistake. It was not his fault. No one wanted to be fooled by others. He already had a lot of self-control by not pulling out his greatsword. When the caravan disappeared into the distance, several figures suddenly appeared near the sentry post. Leger, Han Jean, and Sunir had all arrived. Young Marshal, we checked the 4 carriages as fast as we could. There was only food and clothes in the carriages. There was nothing else. A knight said respectfully. Are you sure? Leger frowned slightly. Yes, young Marshal. The knight nodded. The food in the carriages, the coachman, and the guards all looked normal. I think there must be something wrong, Han Jin said in a low voice. How much can a whole carriage of food be sold for? How much can 10 carriages of food be sold for? Hiring Morrison's with 100 gold coins. It's too extravagant. But what's the problem? Sunir asked. How about we follow them? I'm worried about Morrison's, Leger said. Everyone looked at each other. As the young Marshal, Leger did not have the steadiness and the big picture that a young marshal should have. He was not interested in military affairs. Whenever Lang Ning came to him to ask for instructions, he always let Lang Ning make the decision himself. However, he was very curious about Morrison's. Just like now, he even suggested that everyone follow them. As the uncrowned king of the 9th town, should he stay in the town and take charge of military affairs, or should he go out and monitor a suspicious caravan? This was not a difficult question. Many people could give the right answer. You should stay here. We'll go, Sunir said. Don't forget my profession. No one is more suitable than me. Han Jin and Sunir looked at each other and did not know what to say. Indeed, no one was more suitable than Leger to monitor the caravan. But how should they explain it to Lang Ning? Soon, Moxink and Justin became close to each other. One of them was silly, while the other was trying to make friends with him. There was no danger along the way. Even if there were bandits eyeing the food and clothes, they would not go to Riptide's territory to cause trouble. That would be just asking for death. However, the two men had completely different feelings. One hated that time passed too fast, while the other hated that time passed too slowly. Finally, just before Morrison's was about to go berserk, the caravan finally arrived at Merlin village. It's such a pleasure to chat with you. Justin looked out and smiled. It's a pity that we're going to break up. Morrison's looked at Justin lazily and thought to himself, boy, you're saved for now. You know what? Here's your commission. Please check it. Is there anything else for me? Morrison's weighed the money bag in his hand. Can I go now? Of course. I hope we can work together again next time. Morrison's was a little disappointed. He had already alerted Han Jin and Leger. After causing such a big commotion, it ended just like that? Something was wrong. Justin was about to leave when he noticed Morrison's strange expression. He turned around and asked, Is there anything else? Nothing. Morrison's laughed. I just feel that money is easy to earn. He glanced around and found a familiar-shaped jade pendant on Justin's waist. He hurriedly shifted his gaze elsewhere. Ha, with your status, it's easy for you to do anything. Justin laughed. I wanted to say something 2 days ago. I thought I could barely get over it. But today, I can't get over it. Liars are not human. I don't know what's wrong with this place, but there's been a power outage for 4 consecutive days. Today was the worst. I waited until 8 p.m. when the electricity finally came back. My machine didn't even pass the power check before the power went out again. I had a good temper, but I couldn't help but jump to the window. Ignoring the threat of pharyngitis, I yelled a dozen times. Then, I found my clothes, put them on, and went downstairs. There were already many people gathered downstairs. The power outage was torturous. Children couldn't do their homework or watch TV. Adults couldn't take a shower. The things in the fridge were melting. The fans and air conditioners were just decorations. It was also a rare hot day. Those were all parents who couldn't take it anymore. It was a mass incident. At that time, I was invigorated. I ran around the crowd and tried my best to persuade everyone to call the Power Supply Bureau, the Electricity Bureau, and even the mayor's hotline. I almost organized everyone to set up roadblock. Of course, this was a matter of principle. I knew the severity of it. How should I put it? Anyway, the municipal facilities and style of work in the north can't compare to the south. But compared to some of the special districts in Shaanxi that have already entered a slave society, it can still be proud. I messed around until 10 p.m. when the electricity finally came back. But in the end, something happened. An internet cafe owner beat up a maintenance worker from the electricity bureau. I've opened an internet cafe before, so I know how painful it is. I sympathize. I will finish the 2 chapters today no matter what. Tomorrow's update won't be delayed either. It's just that it will be delayed. Please forgive me. Chapter 110. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with the goods? Morrison's asked with his eyes wide open. There's nothing wrong with them. They're all food and clothes. That's strange. Moxink rested his chin on his hand and pondered deeply. Han Jin, Sunir, Sassu, and Leger were all here. They sat in a circle. Justin had given them a lot of questions, but they couldn't figure it out. Morrison's, what kind of person do you think Justin is? Han Jin asked slowly. Him? He's just an idiot. Morrison snorted. You want to fight with me? It seems like he's just a nobody. Those people sent Justin to test Morrison's. Yeah. Morrison's nodded. He then realized what Morrison's was trying to say. He said angrily, Raphael, what do you mean by that? You only need to send an insignificant person to test me? I think Raphael has a point. Sunir interrupted. If even Morrison's thinks he's an idiot, then you can imagine how stupid Justin is. You're talking nonsense. Morrison's suddenly remembered something. He's wearing a jade pendant. It's the same as the one we saw last time. Do you think he's just a nobody? The same as this one. Han Jin quickly took out the jade pendant from his infinite space ring. It's exactly the same as this one. My eyes can't be wrong. Han Jin and Sunir looked at each other and asked in unison, Who are they? We don't have to think too much. Leger said slowly. If they're just testing us, then they'll come in contact with us later. 9th Town is in our hands. We just need to wait quietly. You're indeed a high-grade thief. When it comes to patience, no one can beat you, Sassu said with a smile. We can only wait. Han Jin stood up. How about we disguise ourselves as thieves and chase after them? Morrison said. That's a terrible idea. Sunir said bluntly. They're transporting food and clothes this time because they're testing you. They don't want to lose too much. What can you do if you take those things? Morrison scratched his head and quickly changed the topic. By the way, Justin said that a few Morgan & Co. branches in the Biteman are still running. The situation isn't as chaotic as we thought. That's good news. Han Jin smiled. In the past, we couldn't help Chile. Now that we have Leger, we can help Chile take back the power that belongs to her at any time. It must be admitted that power was a good thing. If there were reporters in this world who interviewed Han Jin and the others and asked them how they felt after having their own territory, they would give the reporters the same answer. It was very peaceful, very free, and very cool. Han Jin didn't have to hide to do Taoist experiments anymore. Even if the noises and monsters he created alarmed many people, he wouldn't be disturbed. Chile could go shopping without any worries. There were mages in the 1st and 2nd Cavalry units. Although there were only 6 mages in total, their knowledge, equipment, and resources were all very standard. For example, they had their own laboratories, their own reference room, and some completed magic array scrolls. Sassu was like a fish in water in this environment. Compared to the environment they used to live in, this was heaven. It was a world that belonged to them. This was the influence of power and influence. One day, Sassu walked out of the house and was about to take a breather in the yard when he bumped into Morrison's and Sylvia. Where are you going? Morrison's was carrying a greatsword. He was sweating all over. It was obvious that he had just practiced swordsmanship. I'm going to the yard for a while. Unfortunately, Sassu was standing at a disadvantage. The smell of sweat almost suffocated him. He was too embarrassed to do anything else, so he could only take a step to the side. Where's Raphael? Morrison's didn't seem to want to let Sassu go so easily. He still stood in front of him, blocking his way. He went out with Sunir. Sasu answered casually. He just wanted to get rid of this guy who was emitting a strong masculine scent. What? He went out with Sunir? Morrison's eyes lit up. He immediately moved closer to Sasu. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with them going out? Sylvia asked curiously. Go away. Women shouldn't butt in on men's business. Morrison's pushed Sylvia into the house impatiently. He didn't care about Sasua's wishes and put his arm around his neck. They walked to the middle of the yard. Sasu, have you noticed that the two of them have been in pairs recently? Morrison's whispered mysteriously. Sasu didn't expect Morrison's to pull him over just to say this. He removed his dirty hand from his neck and asked, What does this have to do with you? How can it not? He stopped Cessation, who was about to turn away, and continued, How can you not care about such a big thing happening in our team? Cessation's face looked very gossipy. Fine. Sasu stood there helplessly. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave, but he didn't have the strength to go back to Morrison's university. What's wrong with them going out together? Didn't they always do that in the past? Sasu asked. That's the problem. Why would the two of them go out together? Where are they going? What are they going to do? Do you know? Morrison's voice became louder and louder. Even Stillberg, who was tidying up on the other side of the yard, stopped what he was doing and pricked up his ears. How would I know what they're going to do? Do you? Ha! Let me tell you, this is the difference between a man and a boy. Morrison's patted Sasua's shoulder proudly, as if saying that Sasu was inferior to him. I'm much better than you. What's with that look on your face? Sasua's face reddened. He couldn't help but raise his voice. Then tell me, what are they going to do? Let me tell you. Actually, the two of them are going to. Before Morrison's could finish his sentence, a sharp arrow pierced the ground in front of Morrison's. Morrison's was stunned. It wasn't because of the arrow, but because he saw Han Jin and Sunir standing not far from the yard. More importantly, Sunir had drawn her longbow again. Han Jin was smiling. He didn't seem angry at all. On the contrary, he seemed to be in a good mood. Han Jin slowly walked into the yard with his hands behind his back. When he passed by Morrison's, he stopped and patted Morrison's shoulder. Morrison's, to be honest, I really admire your courage. With that, Han Jin casually walked past Morrison's. Sunir. Morrison's gulped. He was trying to think of a way to get away with it. Swish. An arrow brushed past Moxink's neck, and the biting wind caused by the arrow aroused a layer of fine goosebumps on Moxink's skin. Morrison's was scared out of his wits. He turned around and ran into the house. Even though he knew that Sunir couldn't hurt him, he knew that he was in the wrong. He didn't dare to face Sunir. He could only take the opportunity to escape. What a boring fellow, Sunir coldly said. No one could see her expression under the mask. However, her gaze was somewhat unnatural. Sunir, you know that I wouldn't discuss such a boring topic with him. Morrison's was holding me back. He wouldn't let me go. Sasu hurriedly explained. Sunir rolled her eyes at Sasu and left the yard. Actually, she wasn't done talking to Han Jin. However, she couldn't continue the conversation now. Sasu finally let out a sigh of relief as he watched Sunir's back. At this moment, Sylvia's voice came from the house. Sylvia was usually very bright and cheerful when she spoke. However, her voice now was filled with a sinister tone. Morrison's, what did you just say? What did I say? Morrison's asked as he peeked out. You said it yourself. Don't you know? Sylvia suddenly roared. What did I say? Morrison's didn't back down. Damn it. I was almost killed by that cruel elf. Don't you know how to care for me? Why did you yell at me? What are you yelling at me for? The difference between a boy and a man? Sylvia gritted her teeth. Looks like you're a man now, aren't you? You're a man now, aren't you? What? What man? Morrison's expression changed. The next moment, Moxink's figure disappeared from the door with a whoosh, followed by the sound of fighting. Cessation looked up at the sky and sighed helplessly. "Brothers and sisters, why don't you go back to your room and fight?" he thought. Léger's figure suddenly appeared at the entrance of the yard. "Raphael, Sassu, you're all here. That's great. What's going on inside?" "Morrison's and Sylvia are fighting." Sassu smiled bitterly. He suddenly noticed that Léger's expression was very serious. "What happened?" "There's something very strange happening outside the town. I think we should go and take a look," Léger said slowly. "Is it related to Morgan and Company? Or is it related to the other generals of Riptide?" Han Jean asked. "Neither. You'll know when you go out with me." Chapter 111. About 10 miles to the east of Ninth Town, hundreds of knights had set up a perimeter near a small forest. Some farmer had also gathered nearby, discussing something in a low voice. In the morning, a few farmer had come here to tidy up a piece of wasteland. While they were busy, they suddenly heard a thunderous sound, and the ground shook violently. Then, they saw a black hole appear in the ground. The farmer was scared, and quickly reported it to the knight. Logically speaking, this was not a big deal. The key was that the hole was too big. It had a diameter of about 50 meters, and it was so dark that the bottom could not be seen. It was faintly emitting cold air. Han Jean frowned. The hole was definitely not formed naturally. The wall was very smooth like a mirror and it was straight up. The smell coming from the hole made him very uncomfortable. Moxink casually picked up a fist-sized gravel from the ground and threw it into the hole, but there was no response for a long time. The crowd couldn't help but feel astonished that the hole was too deep. "Are you crazy? The smell of darkness is so strong here. Are you trying to kill us all?" Sassu said angrily. "Is it that serious?" Morrison said unhappily. "I think you should change your profession and become a bard. It's just a hole. Why are you making such a fuss?" "What do you mean by the smell of darkness?" Han Jean was interested in Sassua's words. Sassu glanced at Han Jean. "Haven't you heard about the legend of the abyss? It's just a legend. Only you can take it seriously." Morrison's caught Sassua's faulty wording and curled his lip. "Listen to Sassu. The legend of the abyss is real," Sunir said. Moxink straightened his neck and was about to say something, but suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his waist. It turned out that Silner had pinched him from behind. He immediately shut his mouth. A long time ago, all the races got along well. Although there were some small disputes, there was never a large-scale conflict. Sassu said slowly, until one day the Abyss race suddenly rushed to the surface. Their cold-bloodedness and violence brought about earth-shattering changes to the world. "The Abyssal race you mentioned is very powerful?" Han Jean asked. "Their talent is fighting. It is said that it takes at least 10 well-trained warriors to kill an adult Tauren. The ancient records say that the Abyss world is full of blood and violence. As long as the Abyss race can live to adulthood, they are all strong warriors. Those who are weak can only be eliminated. What happened in the end? Although the Abyss race is strong, they are lacking in numbers. Under the threat of extinction, the races on the surface gave birth to heroes who could create miracles. For example, Wargod Abraham, Holy Knight Gotha, Elf Messenger Doreen, Mountain King Danton, and at the critical moment, the dragon race also joined the war. Sassu became very excited when he talked about the legends of the past. The Abyss race suffered heavy losses and had no choice but to retreat to the underground. According to the records of the Elven race, the reason for the Abyss race's defeat was an internal rebellion. Sunir said slowly, when the Abyss race's kings fought on the surface, one or more of them united and seized control of the underground. To be exact, the Abyss race was not defeated. Those kings voluntarily gave up the war because they knew that their roots were underground. "No matter what the reason was, we won in the end," Sassu said. There is a legend on this continent that whoever can go deep into the underground world and obtain the evil horn will have the power to look down on the entire continent, Leger said. There are people who believe that? Han Jin asked, puzzled. According to his opinion, even if there was such a thing as the evil horn, it should have fallen into the hands of the Abyss race long ago. Why would it just sit there and wait for people to get it? Sassu smiled. Since it is a legend, it means that it has been around for a long time. There are bound to be people who believe it. The young Zagund was one of them. When Zagund went, no one thought that he could come back alive. However, to everyone's surprise, not only did Zagund come back from the underground world safe and sound, he also brought back a group of vampires. These are his current vampire guard. With the help of the vampires, he was able to establish such a large foundation. But don't the people on the surface hate the Abyss race? According to what you said, how could Zagund be safe and sound until now? At that time, the races on the surface were able to unite because the Abyss race was too bloody. They attacked all life that appeared in front of them without reason. This made all the races at that time feel a sense of crisis, because no one knew who the next misfortune would befall. Sassu said, although Zagund loved to kill, he was not without reason. The people in his territory could not resist his tyranny, and the people in other territories could not taste his bloodthirstiness. Moreover, the situation on the continent is so chaotic now. Without enough benefits, who would take the initiative to attack Zagund, a mad dog that would bite people? Are the Dark Elves also an Abyss race? Han Jin asked curiously. No. We just have different beliefs, Sunir said with some displeasure. Then what is with this big hole? Is it a passage from the Abyss race to the surface? Seeing that Sunir was a little unhappy, Han Jin changed the topic without leaving a trace. This is not the first time this kind of hole has appeared. Some people said that it can lead to the underground world, and some said that it can't. However, the truth is not something that I can know. If it can really lead to the underground world, does it mean that the Abyss race can also come to the surface through it? Even if they can, it won't be now. Sassu shrugged. Then why are you so nervous? Since they don't dare to come up, why are you so anxious? Morrison's muttered at the side. They don't dare to appear on the surface in a large scale, but if there is really an Abyss race below and they are alarmed by you, they can definitely return to the depths of the hole after killing us. The powerhouses in the Abyss are not something that we can fight against now. You can imagine it just by looking at those vampires. Sassu said seriously. Forget it, let's just seal the hole and leave this place. Seeing that the two were about to quarrel again, Han Jin quickly persuaded. Under Leger's command, the knight ran into the forest, cut down a lot of trees, and dragged them to the side of the hole. Suddenly, Sunir frowned and said, Wait, don't move. What's wrong? Sassu was stunned. I feel, there is someone down there. Han Jin took out a piece of paper from his space ring and folded it into a paper crane. He drew a talisman and hid it on the paper crane. The paper crane suddenly became a living creature, spreading its small wings and silently sliding down the wall of the hole. Everyone took a few steps back and left the edge of the hole. After a while, Han Jin suddenly opened his eyes and said softly, There is someone down there. Who is it? I don't know. I'll go down and take a look later. Han Jin looked at Leger. Leger understood and called over a few knights. He gave the order in a low voice. The knights dispersed the farmer in the distance, while Sunir and the others surrounded Han Jin. Han Jin had mastered some very special magic. Sunir, Leger, and the others had already reached a consensus. This was everyone's secret, and they had to make sure that no one else knew about it. Raphael, can you do it by yourself? Sunir whispered. Don't worry. Maybe my fighting ability is not as good as yours, but when it comes to escaping, all of you combined are not as good as me. Han Jin laughed. How about, I go down with you? Morrison's smiled mischievously. I have 2 lives. Even if I jump down, your magic will protect me. Morrison's had been enchanted with the faked earth corpse for a while now. At first, he didn't feel anything, but after a while, he couldn't help but feel curious. He really wanted to know the specific effects of the spell, but unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to die. As you wish. Han Jin glared at Morrison's. If you dare to waste my magic, I won't help you for 3 years. Why do you need 3 years? How about 3 days? Morrison's tried to negotiate. Han Jin didn't want to continue arguing with Morrison's. Seeing that the knights had already turned around according to Leger's order, he shrank his body and disappeared into the ground. The next moment, Han Jin appeared underground. He hid behind a huge rock and held his breath, quietly listening to the movements in front of him. Damn it, an angry voice said. An exasperated voice said, I told you not to move. Why didn't you listen? Who would have thought that the magic circle could only be activated once? Another voice argued. Nonsense. How long has this underground city been sealed? The person in front said angrily. Is the energy of the magic crystal endless? Stop arguing. Another voice rang out. Immediately think of a way to seal this hole. What can we do? I don't have any magic crystals to replace it anyway. And it's too late. There were many people above just now. They must have noticed us. Let's wait for Master Zagun's anger. At this moment, a pair of blood-red lights rose up and rushed toward the place where Han Jin was hiding. Enemy! Black Raven found the enemy. Han Jin touched the ground with his toes and rushed out from behind the rock. He raised his hand and cast a pure light charm. In the white light, he saw 3 monsters standing in front of him. 2 of them looked like humans, but they had a pair of long, twisted horns on their heads and looked extremely ferocious. The last one was a real monster, like a jellyfish floating in the sea. It had an egg-shaped body with a dozen tentacles. Its body was covered with scales, but there were no organs, such as eyes, nose, and so on. There was nothing on its body. Chapter 112. What was that? Han Jin felt a chill in his heart, but he still had to weigh the opponent's strength. While releasing the pure light charm, he had also activated the spirit possession art. His body turned into a gust of wind and rushed straight forward. Unexpectedly, the monster with many tentacles let out a series of miserable screams and struggled desperately in the white light. The black crows that were flying towards Han Jin were even more miserable. They either crashed into the cave wall or fell to the ground. With the improvement of his energy, Han Jin's fighting skills were always changing. Because he had mastered too many Taoist methods, his flexibility was unparalleled. At first, he tried to make fire charms, but fire charms were low-level Taoist method. Although their power had been greatly improved in this world, they were still very limited. For example, last time, he used fire charms to attack the middle-aged knight, but the knight didn't care about his attack at all. Absorbing a few fire attribute magic crystals would allow him to create a fire talisman. However, if he were to accumulate all the fire elements, he would be able to create dozens of fire talismans in one go. Then, he would be able to create a 3 true fire talisman. On the surface, it seemed that the latter cost too much, but fire charms could only tickle high-level professions, while 3 true fire could be his life-saving weapon. However, he had to accumulate all kinds of elements to make more advanced charms, which created a blank space. Therefore, Han Jin spent a part of his energy to strengthen his body, so that the spirit possession skill could be more powerful. Moreover, he had the faked earth corpse. Even if the opponent's strength was too strong, he still had a chance to escape. Seeing that the jellyfish-like monster couldn't withstand the light of the pure light spell, Han Jin suddenly changed the target of his attack. He turned around and punched the monster's egg-shaped body. Now Han Jin's eyesight had been greatly improved. He could clearly see that the egg-shaped body had a big pit, and then countless green juice sprayed out. Finally, The monster flew out like a cannonball and collided with a long-horned monster behind it. Both of them fell to the ground. The other horned monster roared and swung its fist at Han Jin. Han Jin didn't back down. He swung his fist and the two fists met in midair. Han Jin was just a miscellaneous martial arts expert. He knew a little about martial arts, but only a little. If he was a martial arts expert, he would have many ways to deal with the monster's attack. He could either borrow the monster's strength to fight back or take advantage of the situation to close in. However, Han Jin couldn't do that. This was also determined by the style of the divine battle technique. The so-called divine battle technique was about using brute force to break through brute force, using brute force to fight brute force, and using offense to attack, turning oneself into an invincible general who would charge forward despite facing tens of thousands of enemies. No matter how strong the opponent in front of you was, you must not be at a disadvantage in terms of momentum. You must maintain a fearless will. If there was fear in your heart, it was equivalent to breaking your own divine battle technique. With a loud bang, Han Jin took a step back, while the horned monster took 4 or 5 steps back. Clearly, Han Jin had the upper hand. Han Jin's figure turned into a blur. With an angry roar, he swung his fist at the horned monster's chest. The horned monster opened its blood-red eyes and swung its fist to meet the punch. However, this time, Han Jin's fist had been released to the fullest extent, while the monster met the attack in a panic. With another bang, the soft armor on the monster's right elbow suddenly broke. A section of white bone pierced through its flesh and the soft armor, protruding out. Han Jin's speed was too fast and his strength was too strong. The horned monster's arm bone was forcibly broken. Of course, the so-called strong was only in comparison. This kind of pain was unbearable. The horned monster let out a mournful howl. Han Jin's left fist followed up and bombarded the horned monster's bull lip. Its mouth full of snow-white teeth and 2 long fangs broke. The horned monster couldn't help but fall backward and fly away. Han Jin continued to follow up. High in the air above the horned monster, his right fist mixed with the whistling of the wind as it smashed down. With a loud bang, Han Jin's fist bombarded the horned monster's chest. At this moment, the horned monster's eyes suddenly bulged high, but its chest caved in deeply. Blood spurted out from its mouth, nose, ears, and eyes. Its body fell heavily to the ground, splashing up sand and stones. The other horned monster pushed its companion aside and rushed at Han Jin with a roar. Seeing that its companion was beaten to the point where it couldn't fight back, it still dared to continue provoking. Its courage was commendable. The cave suddenly became pitch black. Han Jin's finger lightly moved and released a pure light charm. The horned monster was obviously not used to strong light. When the light lit up, it closed its eyes tightly. After a few exchanges, Han Jin had already understood the strength of his opponent. He didn't dodge or give way. Instead, he punched back. Just as the horned monster's fist was about to land on Han Jin's shoulder, Han Jin's fist had already hit the monster's throat. The horned monster's body suddenly stiffened. It couldn't use any more strength. At most, it grabbed Han Jin's shoulder, and then its body fell down bit by bit. Han Jin's punch had shattered its throat, shattered its blood vessels, and broken its windpipe. No matter how strong a monster was, it could only close its eyes and wait for death after suffering such injuries. Han Jin raised his foot and kicked the long-horned monster in the chest. In the corner, the jellyfish-like monster was struggling to raise its tentacles. Its companion had already flown over and hit it, causing it to let out a series of chirping noises. At this moment, Han Jin suddenly heard a noise behind him. His body abruptly rose from the ground. A red light passed through his afterimage and hit the wall of the cave. A few fist-sized rocks shot out from the wall. Han Jin saw that it was another jellyfish-like monster that had attacked him. He released a levitation spell and flew over the monster. The jellyfish-like monster raised one of its tentacles and followed Han Jin closely. In the dimming light of the pure light spell, Han Jin could clearly see that there seemed to be an eyeball at the end of the tentacle. It had a pupil and could blink. The moment the eyeball turned red, Han Jin kicked the cave wall and his body suddenly changed direction. A red light shot out from the tentacle, but it didn't even touch Han Jin's shadow. Han Jin swooped down like a goshawk and waved his hand at the top of the egg-shaped body. The tentacle that the monster used to support its body obviously couldn't withstand such a huge force. The egg-shaped body fell down and hit the ground. It first became round, then a horizontal oval. Just when Han Jin felt the resistance of the ground, the egg-shaped body had turned into countless green juice, splashing in all directions with a bang. It was like a balloon that had exploded. The cave was plunged into darkness again. There were frightened chirps in the distance. Han Jin cast a pure light spell in the direction of the sound. This was his disadvantage. He couldn't see in the dark. The two jellyfish-like monsters screamed and fled in the white light. Their courage was obviously very different from the two long-horned monsters. However, although they had many tentacles, they didn't run fast. They gave a very hurried feeling, like two women with small feet walking in small step. Han Jin tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and shot straight more than 10 meters away. Then, he tapped the ground again and caught up with the two monsters. Cha-cha-cha! One of the monsters turned around and screamed in horror. Han Jin kicked the egg-shaped body. The monster howled and flew out, crashing into the cave wall. But before it could touch the wall, its body couldn't withstand the huge force. With a bang, it turned into green raindrop. Han Jin stretched out his foot and stepped on the tentacle of the other monster. The monster fell forward involuntarily, but its tentacles were still moving like a strange spider. Unfortunately, no matter how hard it tried, it couldn't move forward at all. "You are Zagun's people?" Han Jin said coldly. "Cha-cha. Cha-cha-cha." The monster used a strange sound to reply to Han Jin. Han Jin looked at the green juice on his body with disgust. He kicked again, and the monster shot straight out like a football. It landed on a giant rock. The scaly skin wrapped tightly around the rock, and the green juice kept flowing down the rock. A few of its tentacles trembled a few times, then stopped moving. Han Jin walked back. There was only one monster left. Han Jin couldn't judge the monster's attack power, but its body was very weak. The densely packed scales looked very tough, but unfortunately, there were no bones inside. It wasn't much stronger than a bubble. The monster had just struggled out from under its companion's body. Its dozen tentacles kept trembling, and it looked very frightened. "Did Zagun send you?" Han Jin asked slowly. "Cha-cha-cha. I know you can speak our language." Han Jin stepped on one of the tentacles and crushed it. "Cha-cha." The monster let out a sharp cry, then shouted, I'll talk. We are an exploration team." "Whose exploration team?" Han Jin raised his foot. "It's Master Zagun's exploration team. He wants to attack this place." Han Jin felt a little nervous. His good days had just begun, and he didn't want to be disturbed. "This underground city is too big. Master Zagund asked us to find out where each intersection leads to. Master sent out a total of hundreds of exploration teams, and we are only one of them." "How many people are coming in this direction?" "Only us." "How many monsters are there in your exploration team?" "Monsters." The monster was stunned. Obviously, it couldn't accept Han Jin's title, but it had no choice but to say, "There's a total of 6. Han Jin didn't say anything. He didn't know if these monsters left behind any markings. It seemed that he had to take a closer look, but before that, he had to go up and explain to Sunir and the others. Han Jin couldn't see the monster clearly in the dark cave, but the monster could see Han Jin clearly. Seeing that Han Jin seemed to be thinking about something, it quietly raised its tentacles and aimed at Han Jin. It could only be said that it had lost its rationality. It even forgot how obvious the red light on its tentacles was in the dark. Just as it was about to attack, Han Jin had already grabbed its tentacle and pulled it in half. Cha-cha! The monster let out a hiss, then slowly fell to the ground. Their weakness wasn't only their body, but their tentacles were also their weakness. Chapter 113. When Han Jin once again appeared on the surface, the night had already retreated. Only Sunir and the others were left. Seeing Han Jin emerge from the ground, they were already used to it. Only Lang Ning, who had just arrived, was shocked. Sasu asked anxiously, "How was it?" "We encountered a few monsters." "Monsters? What kind of monsters?" Han Jin gave a simple description. Sunir said in shock, "Those are minotaurs and evil eyes. They belong to the Abyss race?" Han Jin more or less understood the strengths of those monsters. "Yes." Sunir paused. "What about those monsters?" "I already took care of them." Sunir was stunned and said seriously, "Raphael, next time you encounter something like this, don't do it yourself. Your combat experience is very poor and—" "It is very poor," Morrisons interrupted. Han Jin and Sunir rolled their eyes at Morrisons. Sunir continued, "And you don't even know their characteristics. What if something happens?" "I don't have any other choice," Han Jin shrugged. "This hole is straight up and down. You can't come down to help me." Sunir is worried about you." Morrisons patted Han Jin's shoulder. It was strange. Perhaps it was because he didn't want the goodies to go to others, or perhaps it was because of something else. But after discovering that Sunir and Lang Ning had a lot in common, Morrisons was very worried about Han Jin. He often tried to matchmake Han Jin and Sunir together. "Where did those monsters come from?" Lang Ning asked slowly. "They are Zagun's subordinates," Han Jin sighed. "I didn't expect that underground city to be so big. You guys go back to the town first. I still have to go down and try to remove the traces left behind by those monsters." "Oh right, we should control those farmer. We can't let the news leak out." Sunir suddenly remembered something. "Otherwise, when Zagun knows that there is a hole that leads directly to the 9th town, he will still send people here." "But—" Leger was stunned and hurriedly said, "I've already sent people to chase those farmer away. When I came here, I met those farmer. I sent people to stop them," Lang Ning said. Han Jin looked at Lang Ning. He didn't know that Lang Ning's style was very meticulous. It was to the point that he didn't have any loopholes. "That's good." Sunir heaved a sigh of relief and then sighed. "In the future, our situation will become more and more difficult." "Why do you say that?" Morrisons asked, puzzled. "Most of Zagun's subordinates are dark creatures. That huge underground city will become his solid base. We can't fight him in the dark, but he can choose to attack the city on the surface." Sunir said slowly, "Give him some time to recuperate in the underground city, and his strength will increase rapidly." Lang Ning was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly became ecstatic. He grabbed Leger and hurriedly said, "Young Marshal, I have a great idea." "What? What idea?" Leger rarely saw Lang Ning with such an expression, and asked in surprise. "For Zagund, protecting the underground city is his foundation. Am I right?" "Yes, what's wrong?" Others also know this, including Dismark of the Holy Crown City, the 4 Castellans of the Biteman, and Zagund's current ally, Lord Mali of the Depew City. Lang Ning said slowly, "No one wants to see Zagund's strength increase. It's said that Lord Mali has slowed down his attack on the Holy Crown City, so that Dismark can deal with Zagund. I even suspect that Mali and Dismark have reached an agreement secretly. Otherwise, how can Dismark have the strength to continuously attack the underground city?" "What you said has nothing to do with us, right?" Morrisons curled his lips. He firmly believed that this guy who dared to hook up with Sunir must be suppressed. No one wants to see Zagund occupy the underground city. Under such pressure, for a long time, Zagund must use all his strength to protect his foundation. Lang Ning's face was full of excitement. So, what will he rely on to protect his Black Raven city? Sunir and the others were stunned. Young Marshal, we must fight our way out. Lang Ning's voice was getting louder and louder. Young Marshal, we are in a very difficult situation here. The Bite Man has been divided for many years, and the Four Castellans' power is deeply rooted. If you rashly start a war, you will become the target of everyone's criticism, because this is equal to helping Zagund. If you only stay in a stalemate with them, compared to this kind of scheming, both you and I are far from being their opponents. Why don't you play to our strengths? Young Marshal, fight your way out. Black Raven City is our hope. Lang Ning's voice echoed in the forest. Obviously, he was extremely excited. The Four Castellans are also worried about you. If you decide to attack Black Raven City, they will definitely support you. Only by sending you away can this place truly become their territory. Moreover, Zagund sent the Vampire Guard to kill Bite Man residents everywhere, which has aroused the anger of the whole city. If you want to attack Zagund's base, the army and the people will be on your side. Countless people will be grateful and admire you. When we make a comeback one day, even if they don't help us, they won't stand on the side of the Four Castellans. Black Raven City is vast and fertile. It could have become a very prosperous city, but Zagund's cruel nature made Black Raven City what it is today. Moreover, if we choose the right time, not only will we be able to occupy Black Raven City effortlessly, but we will also be able to take a large amount of resources that Zagund has hoarded. Now that the war is spreading everywhere and there are countless refugees, I am confident that after a period of development, Black Raven City will be able to recover. Good. Sunir shouted. Good. Sasu also reacted. Young Marshal, I'm only worried about one thing now. Lang Ning let out a long sigh and said with a smile. What is it? Dismark is very clear about the significance of that underground city, so he must have a very tight control over it. I don't know how Zagund found out about the secret of the underground city. Lang Ning paused. If someone deliberately leaked the secret to Zagund, then I'm sure that the informant is an extraordinary person. He has great ambition, great insight, and is good at planning. Perhaps at this time, he has already set his sights on Black Raven City. Although the situation on the continent is very chaotic now, the various forces have already formed, and there is almost no room for new lords to survive. He actually thought of using this method to seize Zagund's Black Raven City. Young Marshal, this person will become a formidable opponent for us. Indeed, someone deliberately leaked the secret to Zagund. Sunir sighed. You know this person? Lang Ning was shocked. This extraordinary person you're talking about is our prophet, Lord Raphael. Sunir's expression became more and more strange. You. Sasu looked at Han Jin and then at Lang Ning. You're thinking too much, aren't you? Raphael. He recalled that when Han Jin talked about that matter, he was just trying to create chaos. He shouldn't have calculated to this extent. If what Lang Ning said was true, then Han Jin's brain was too scary. However, he couldn't be sure if it was true or not. Perhaps Han Jin really did have such an idea, but just didn't tell them. I only thought you were a magician and a puppet master. I didn't expect you to be such an outstanding. Lang Ni couldn't continue, saying that Han Jin was a military strategist? But he looked like the leader of a small mercenary group, and he had a close relationship with the young marshal. Saying that Han Jin didn't know anything about military affairs? But his plan was too vicious. He gave Zagund a fat piece of meat that Zagund desperately wanted to swallow, and created an impossible opportunity. This was usually described as a miracle. Ha! Han Jin laughed dryly. He wasn't stupid, so of course he understood Lang Ning's words. But he really didn't think so far ahead. He couldn't deny it, but he couldn't admit it either. It was more or less awkward. Young Marshal, make your decision. Lang Ning's gaze shifted to Leger. This is the best opportunity for us. Although I don't know how to fight a war, I can understand what you're saying. Leger smiled. Go do it. Yes, young Marshal. Lang Ning replied energetically. Ever since he was rescued by Leger, although he had been doing his best to plan for Leger, he felt depressed about the future. This was because they couldn't start a war for no reason, and if it was just internal friction, he doubted that they could win against those crafty old men. Although those few Castellans were average in terms of military strength, when it came to messing with people, each one of them was more shrewd than the other. And now, he saw the hope of flying high. Looking at Lang Ning's back, Leger's gaze fell on Han Jin. Raphael, was it really you? Was it really you who leaked this secret to Zagond? It was him. Sunir, Sassu, Morrisons, and the others nodded in unison. And at that time, he told us that he wanted to create chaos. But after that, he didn't say what we were going to do. Sunir added. Because we didn't have any power at that time. Sassu said. Even if he told us, it would have been meaningless. You. Leger was speechless. Lang Ning's words were still ringing in his ears, and the shock in his heart could not be described with words. I finally understand why Raphael said he wanted to become a lord. Morrisons muttered in a low voice. Raphael, if what Lang Ning said was true, if you really thought of so many things, even if the god of war Abraham was alive, you might not be inferior to him. Sassu stared at Han Jin. All right, we should go back. Sunir looked at Han Jin meaningfully and turned to walk towards the town. Chapter 114. Sir, I'm from Morrison's University, a voice called out. Morrison's turned around and saw two people following behind him. He recognized one of them. It was Justin from Morgan and Company. Justin's clothes were still ordinary, but the other person was much more extravagant. It was already spring, but he was still wearing a cloak made from the feathers of a demon bird. Although it did not match the season, the bright and colorful light attracted people's attention. It also gave him a noble aura. Sir, I haven't seen you for half a month. You look more and more impressive, Justin said with a smile. Really? I didn't notice, but I know my alcohol tolerance is getting higher. Morrison's laugh. When did you come back? I just came back, sir. Let me introduce you. Justin turned around. This is the owner of Morgan and Company, young Master Borg. Young Master, this is the person from Morrison's University that I've often mentioned to you. Hello. Morrison's greeted him warmly. Hello. Borg smiled. This isn't the place to talk, Morrison's University. I know a quiet hotel. Why don't we talk there? What's so good about a hotel? Morrison said. I'm going to the bar anyway. It'll be fun if we talk there. We can also watch a show. The bar is too noisy, Morrison's University. Borg smiled. I have something important to discuss with you, so it's best if we find a quiet place. Is that so? Morrison's hesitated. That's fine. Morrison's might be muddle-headed at times, but if someone treated him like an idiot, he would be the one being played. The reason why he gave in was because he realized that Morrison's had a powerful background. It was not from his clothes, but from his attitude. He had a firm attitude. Only those who thought highly of themselves and were qualified to think highly of themselves would insist on their own opinions. In fact, they could have discussed it anywhere, but they were the ones asking for help, and yet they still had to refute his opinion. This was enough to prove Borg's status. After a while, the three of them walked into a hotel one after another. The hotel was not big, but it was very clean inside. There was no one inside, not even the owner. Obviously, Borg had prepared in advance. Tell me, what do you want? Morrison's University's owner sat on a chair. Do you want me to protect your caravan again? Don't blame me for being nosy. We're friends. How much money can you make by buying food and clothes? Why don't you sell something else? Sir, we want to, but... Borg smiled bitterly. Hundreds of thousands of refugees are hiding in the west side of the city. They have no food and no clothes. Mayor Winston is so worried that he can't sleep. As merchants, we can't bear to see so many people suffer. So, you're still buying food and clothes this time? Yes. Borg nodded. Or are you sending them to Merlin Village? Yes. I thought it was something big. Let's do it according to the old rules. Morrison said lazily. Then, he suddenly remembered something and slammed the table. Don't tell me you're going to lower the price? Morrison's eyes widened as if he was looking at an enemy. Borg was startled. He could not help but laugh. Sir, you're mistaken. This time, we're asking you to escort a caravan made up of more than 100 carriages. Why would we lower the price? Let's do it this way. 200 gold coins. As usual, we'll pay half of it first. When we reach Merlin Village, we'll pay the other half. You should have King said so earlier. You scared me, Morrison's grumbled. Borg was speechless. Who was the one who scared who? He wanted to talk to Morrison's personally, but when he saw this rude guy who only cared about money, he lost all interest in talking. My lord, we have too many goods this time. If we have to check every carriage, perhaps we won't be able to leave even at noon. It's too much of a waste of time. My lord, could you discuss with the soldiers and try to let us pass as quickly as possible? Justin continued. You called me here just to say this? Isn't it just a matter of a sentence? Who dares to check my caravan? Morrison said impatiently. Is there anything else? I still want to go drink. Haha, of course. Who dares to go against you? Justin laughed. He then took out his money pouch and counted 100 gold coins carefully. He placed them on the table. Sir, this is your deposit. Morrison's eyes lit up. He swept the gold coins into a pile. Can't you give me that pouch? How am I supposed to carry so much? Ah, I was careless. Justin quickly took out an empty pouch and handed it to Morrison. Morrison put the gold coins into the pouch and shook it proudly. He then stood up. However, he seemed to have thought of something and his movements slowed down. He frowned and said, Something's wrong. Borg was shocked. He smiled and said, Sir, what's wrong? How many carriages are there this time? About 180. How dare you trick me? Morrison threw the pouch on the table. The table shook violently. How many carriages were there last time? You paid me 100 gold coins. How much is it this time? If the journey is the same, you should pay me 300 gold coins. Do you think I don't know how to count? Borg didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he did feel relieved. His vigilance and doubts disappeared. He didn't want to argue with Moxink, so he winked at Justin. Justin hurriedly counted out another 50 gold coins and put them on the table respectfully. My lord, please don't be angry, please don't be angry. It's all our fault. Justin, let me tell you. Your attitude is wrong. You are lying to your friends. Morrison pointed at Justin's nose and scolded, Damn it! No wonder people say you merchants are cunning. If it was me, Morrison. If it was someone else, wouldn't they have been fooled by you? Sir, please don't be angry. It's our fault. It's our fault. Justin apologized profusely. How about this, my lord? These gold coins can be considered as our compensation, okay? Sir, to be honest, we were really careless. We really don't want to lose a friend like you. After that, Justin handed the pouch to Morrison. Morrison took the pouch and weighed it in his hand. His face finally calmed down. He said in a low voice, Are you still leaving in the morning? Through the south gate? Yes, sir. Like last time, I'll wait for you there. Morrison put away the 2 pouches and swaggered out of the inn. Borg looked at Morrison's back. If he knew that this guy was so uncouth, he wouldn't have come. How unnecessary. An idiot. Borg said softly after Morrison's back disappeared. Asterisk, 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 2 idiots. Morrison said with a proud expression. Let me tell you, This time they sent a big shot to contact me. It seemed that he was still holding a grudge about what happened last time. Bored? Han Jin's eyes fell on Qili. Have you heard of this guy? Never. Qili said bitterly. If he was standing in front of me, I would really want to slap him. How dare he say he's the owner of Morgan and Company? Don't worry. You'll have the chance. Han Jin smiled. I've already checked. Last time, someone was buying a lot of food and clothes. But this time, there was no fluctuation in the market. They must have transported something else. Lang Ning said slowly. But more than 180 carriages. Although Ninth Town is a big town, the quantity of these goods is too large. The most strange thing is that not only food and clothes but also other goods. It's impossible. So, what they want to take away is something that has been hoarded in the town, or something that has been hidden in the town for a long time. Han Jin said lightly, I think it's time to take action. What do you think? I support your opinion, Lang Ning said. Since he learned about Han Jin's past, his attitude towards Han Jin had changed greatly. He respected Leger because of friendship and the past. He respected Sunir because of a good relationship. Now, he respected Han Jin because he knew that if it was him at that time, he would never have been able to think so far ahead. His almost abnormal ability to plan was not only admirable, but also awe-inspiring. Do you think? Han Jin hesitated. Do those guys have anything to do with Rudolph? What can they have to do with him? When Rudolph was alive, why didn't this happen? When Rudolph died, why did they rush to transport the goods? Han Jin said, at that time, Leger should have caught Rudolph first. He shouldn't have killed him so early. After all, Rudolph was the commander of the cavalry. If he didn't kill him, other accidents would have happened. Sunir shook her head. What you said should be just a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence, Han Jin said. Of course, he couldn't be sure. This was just the result of his deduction. There were other possibilities, but he just felt that this was the most likely one. Han Jin then changed the topic. Tomorrow we'll split into two groups. Morrison's, Lang Ning, and I will be in charge of seizing their carriages. You guys will be in charge of finding out where the goods came from. With so many goods, they'll need a lot of manpower to transport them. Actually, we can check now. With more than 100 carriages, they'll need a big place to park, right? Leger can do this alone. Sunir said. I'll go help you guys. No need. Is a cavalry unit not enough to deal with them? Han Jin laughed. I'm telling you, no one is allowed to fight with me. Morrison's gritted his teeth. Leave those two guys to me. Especially that Justin. It's best not to hurt them first. There are a lot of things we need to get out of their mouths, Han Jin said softly. Chapter 116. I can't thank you enough. I went to my brother's place to sit for a while. When I came back, I realized that the monthly votes had really exceeded the quota. I can't express how I feel right now. I'm going to update. I'm going to do it. I'm going to update tomorrow. It was another peaceful morning. Just like any other day, a large group of carriages appeared on the main road and headed towards the south gate. When they were about 100 meters away from the sentry post, the carriages slowly stopped. Justin poked his head out of the second carriage and looked around. He was stunned when he couldn't find Morrison's. Hi! Morrison's carried his greatsword and walked out of the bar. However, he wasn't alone this time. Han Jin and Lang Ning were behind him. Lang Ning was also followed by a dozen knights. Morrison's University? Justin's expression changed. He obviously recognized Lang Ning. The curtain of the carriage was lifted and Borg came out. Han Jin and the others all had evil smiles on their faces. Even if he was really stupid and didn't know how to observe other people's expressions, the fact that someone who shouldn't be here had appeared proved everything. Along with a shrill whistle, a team of heavily armed knights appeared outside the town and blocked the way out of the town. At the same time, a team of soldiers also came out of the alleys. Borg's face turned livid. He stared at Moxink coldly and gnashed his teeth. Moxink, you're a traitor! How dare you betray me? Betray? You think too highly of yourself. Morrison's laughed gloatingly. Don't worry. We're just checking your goods. If there's really no problem, we'll let you go. Ha! Borg's eyes became sharp and filled with hatred. He then spat out 2 words, die. A magic staff appeared in Borg's hand. There was a very eye-catching large blue crystal embedded in the staff. After he spat out those 2 words, the crystal shattered and turned into countless sparks. At the same time, a huge and sharp icicle shot towards Morrison's. The casting speed of the spell was too fast, and the icicle was even faster. The most terrifying thing was that the icicle was a 9th-tier spell. Even a great magician would have a hard time casting it in an instant. Perhaps Borg's strength had reached an unfathomable level, or perhaps he was using the power of the magic staff. However, it was too late to say that now. The result, the most important thing, was the result. The gloating expression on Morrison's face disappeared. He had just swung his greatsword when the icicle pierced through his body and cut him in half. Blood splattered everywhere. People could clearly see Morrison's upper body fly into the air. Lang Ning's position was very lucky. He was not in the range of the icicle, but 2 knights behind him were caught in the crossfire and killed by the icicle. The icicle killed several people, but it was still unstoppable. It blasted a 2-meter-wide hole in the wall of the bar and flew into the bar. Then, there was a violent explosion, mixed with the screams of men and women filled with fear. Borg's face turned pale. He cast a 7th-tier spell, levitation, and his body rose into the air. However, as soon as his feet left the carriage, a tall wooden figure appeared in front of him out of thin air. It hugged him tightly in a very passionate and ambiguous manner, then pushed him down and pressed him to the ground. No matter how shocking the previous spell was, Borg was still a magician. He couldn't break free from the wooden giant no matter how hard he tried. Besides, he had already cast the icicle spell and the levitation spell, so he didn't have the energy to cast any other powerful spells. No. Borg struggled with all his might. Save me! One by one, figures jumped down from the carriages behind them. Some of them went up to the soldiers, while others rushed towards Borg. Unfortunately, due to the distance, Han Jin appeared in front of Borg 1 step ahead of them. He swung his fist down. With a boom, Borg's exposed right arm was broken by Han Jin's punch. It was twisted at a strange angle, followed by his left arm. Ah! Burger let out an inhuman scream. He didn't know where he got the strength to kick Han Jin with one of his legs. However, a magician would only be asking for trouble if they fought hand to hand. Han Jin gently reached out and grabbed Borg's ankle. He then raised his leg and struck Borg's knee. With a crack, Borg's head tilted to the side and he fainted. Get out of my way! A guard rushed over, his eyes red. He swung his sword at Han Jin. Han Jin snorted coldly. His body straightened and his left hand pulled the guard's sword away. His right fist followed and hit the guard's chest. The guard spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. After using spirit possession, Han Jin's body became incomparably tough. He would not directly block the enemy's sword. Instead, he would choose the right angle to push the sword away. In addition, the strength of the guards was not high. Han Jin was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Every time he struck, a guard would fly backwards. The others could clearly see Han Jin's movements, but they could not block his attacks. Because of speed, because of strength. There was a saying in martial arts, one strong person can defeat 10 skilled martial artists. In the face of such a huge gap, all techniques were useless. Lang Ning roared and joined the battle like a mad tiger. Morrison's was Leger's comrade-in-arms. He could not accept this result, let alone face Leger. The soldiers swarmed forward and fought with the guards of the caravan. One side came prepared, the other side was panicking. The battle quickly tilted towards Riptide's side. Han Jin suddenly saw a ray of black light shooting towards him at a speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. If his body had not been strengthened recently, with his speed, he would not have been able to react even if he saw it. Han Jin hurriedly stretched out his right arm and blocked the ray of black light. An arrow spun and flew into the air. A deep wound appeared on Han Jin's right arm. Blood gushed out, and he felt that his right arm was sore and painful. He could barely move it. Han Jin raised his head and saw a pair of eyes full of killing intent. At the same time, a dark green arrow sank into the ground. With Han Jin as the center, vines stretched out from the ground and wrapped around Han Jin. Han Jin roared and used a levitation spell to leap into the air. He did not dare to look away from the eyes of the elf. When his feet left the ground, he saw a trace of mockery in the elf's eyes. Then, he saw a black arrow on the bowstring. Han Jin felt a chill run down his spine. The elf's posture was calm and confident, as if she had already sentenced her opponent to death. Obviously, she had full confidence in this arrow. Han Jin, on the other hand, was in midair and had nowhere to borrow strength or use earthmeld. He could only be a target. I've lost. Han Jin groaned in his heart. He had actually lost 2 life-saving talismans. The art of faked earth was the reason why he dared to fight with all his opponents. He could not imagine how he would be able to walk in this world without the protection of the art of faked earth. At least for half a month, he could only obediently hide. A black light flashed, and what Han Jin was waiting for did not happen. The elf's longbow was drawn to a full moon, but the arrow could not be released. This was because an arrow had shot into her left ear and came out of her right ear. It had pierced through her head. Only then did Han Jin notice Sunir's figure. He could not describe the feeling of regaining what he had lost. If he was as bold as Morrison's, he might have shouted, "Sunir, I love you, kill!" Lang Ning roared. His wildly beating heart finally calmed down. The scene of Han Jin being sniped almost drove him crazy. Morrison's had died. If Han Jin also died here, then he could really kill himself on the spot. Kill! The soldiers also shouted. There were only 2 senior professionals in the caravan. Now that one of them was dead and the other was injured, the rest were just a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Lang Ning swung his spear with all his might and sent a caravan guard in front of him flying. Because of his agitation, his strength was a little too much. Half of his body turned to the side, but the result was that he suddenly froze in place. His ferocious fighting spirit disappeared without a trace. There was only one person who could make him like this, and that was Morrison's. If Morrison's was still alive, then what was the point of him gritting his teeth and fighting? Morrison stood at the corner of the street, holding his greatsword tightly. He was in a daze, as if he had been isolated from the world. He still could not react. How? Lang Ning could not believe his eyes. This was impossible. This was absolutely impossible. At such a close distance, when faced with an instantaneous icicle attack, any professional below the 8th grade would have no chance of escaping. Even a thief would not be able to escape. What's more, he saw Morrison's being killed with his own eyes. The desperate resistance of the caravan guards aroused the murderous intent of the soldiers. They no longer showed any mercy. Often, after cutting down their opponents, they would follow up with a few more blows. If a frightened horse ran around, they would kill it together with the horse. The whole street was filled with blood, and the sound of killing was deafening. The 9th town was an ancient town, and the residents had never experienced such a scene. They were all hiding in their homes in fear. No one dared to go out and watch at this time. The resistance of the caravan guards was getting weaker and weaker. Only a few guards were left hiding in the carriages, fighting for a little time to breathe. At this time, they did not have the energy to think about the value of resistance. They were only fighting instinctively for their own survival. The actions of the soldiers were getting rougher and rougher. They even overturned the carriages and poked the inside with their spears. There were a few women in one of the carriages. No one knew who they were, but the soldiers did not care. They surrounded the women and cut them down without giving them a chance to speak. In war, it was impossible to distinguish between individual behavior. His comrades and himself were one group, and all the enemies were another group. This was a fight between groups. Moreover, Riptide's military discipline was very strict. The soldiers would not have any other ideas. Since the enemy's group threatened their survival, then they would kill them all. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 117. Morrison slowly walked towards Han Jin, but the way he walked was a little strange. Those with good eyesight could see that his hands and legs were trembling slightly, and his eyes were wandering around as if he was thinking about something. What just happened? Lang Ning could not help but ask Morrison's. Morrison's ignored Lang Ning and walked straight towards Han Jin. He reached out his hand to pat Han Jin on the shoulder, but for some reason, his hand stopped in midair. After a while, he slowly pulled his hand back. "Raphael, from today onwards my life is yours," Morrison said with a hoarse voice. Han Jin's gaze had been fixed on Sunir. When he heard Morrison's words, he turned around and looked at Morrison's in surprise. Lang Ning was also surprised, but he immediately realized that Morrison's escape from death must have something to do with Han Jin. Otherwise, he wouldn't speak in such a heavy tone as he had always been carefree. "From today onwards, my life is yours," Morrison's repeated. He could not describe the fear he felt after coming back from death. In the end, all his excitement and impulsiveness turned into a surging feeling of gratitude. He felt that only a promise could express his feelings. Han Jin looked at Morrison seriously. After a while, he smiled and said, "Morrison's, I'm not used to the way you are now." "Is that so?" Morrison scratched his head. He also felt embarrassed. Some things could be done without saying. Morrison's laughed. Then, "Raphael, give me another life." "You." Han Jin did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Have you learned your lesson?" "Yes." Morrison's nodded seriously. "Damn it. I shouldn't have wasted time talking to him. I should have just attacked him." At this time, Sunir had already walked over. She looked at Morrison's and smiled. "Morrison's, are you really okay now?" "I can't be any better now." Morrison's waved his sword. "Look, Raphael, you've created a miracle." Sunir's face was full of admiration. "To be honest, when you buffed Morrison's, I did not believe that such a miraculous spell existed in the world. You have overthrown the common sense that most people know about magic." The scene suddenly became quiet. Everyone's eyes were focused on Han Jin. If an outsider heard this, they would definitely think that Sunir was a traitor and a blasphemer. This was because there was only one kind of existence that could break the common sense of magic and not be restricted by the rules. That was God. A loud crash woke Sunir and the others up. The guards of the merchant group had all been killed. A few soldiers went to check the overturned carriages. As soon as they opened the lids of the carriages, dozens of heavy armors rolled out from within. Lang Ning's expression immediately became serious. The soldiers quickly went to check the other carriages. As expected, the other carriages were filled with military supplies. There were bundles of arrows, swords, and war spears. Some of the carriages were even filled with strange metal parts. The soldiers could not tell what they were used for. "Heavens! General! General!" A soldier who jumped on top of the carriage suddenly shouted. He even forgot to keep it a secret. "Magic crystal cannons. There are magic crystal cannons inside." Sunir and Lang Ning gasped at the same time. They were both soldiers and knew the purpose and power of magic crystal cannons very well. They did not care about anything else and rushed towards the carriage. Lang Ning jumped on top of the carriage and pushed the soldier away roughly. He looked inside and saw 2 magic crystal cannons quietly hiding in the dark. The clean and smooth bodies of the cannons and the black muzzles made Lang Ning feel dizzy. "General, there are magic crystal cannons here too." 20 meters away, another soldier shouted. "Shut up!" Lang Ning shouted with all his strength. His eyes involuntarily fell on the 2 merchants. "What are they doing? Where did they get the military supplies?" That night, Riptide's 1st and 2nd Cavalry Brigades garrisons were heavily guarded. No matter which angle one looked at it, one could see at least 10 fully armed soldiers patrolling around. Han Jin, Sunir, Sasu, Leger, and Lang Ning were sitting around a long table and discussing something in low voices. The atmosphere was very heavy. Borg and Justin had already revealed all the secrets they knew under the torture of the military law team. Han Jin and Leger were worried that they might miss something, so they interrogated them separately. These 2 people were not easy to deal with, but Han Jin's methods were more gentle and modern, while Leger's methods were much more bloody. Borg and Justin had been tortured beyond recognition, but what they had revealed could be described as earth-shattering. After getting acquainted with Leger and helping Leger to take back part of the military power, Han Jin had thought about setting his foundation in Biteman and developing bit by bit with the help of Leger's army. In other territories, the lords were supreme, so he couldn't do anything to them. However, the 4 castellans in Biteman were always scheming against each other, so there was always an opportunity for him to have conflicts. Unfortunately, he was not the only smart person in the world. What he could think of, others could also think of, and what he could see, others could also see. What's more, that person not only thought of, but also saw through, and started his own action more than 10 years ago. He was Woodrow, the chief sheriff of Biteman City. As the eldest grandson of Woodrow, Borg knew many secrets of Woodrow. When these secrets were revealed in front of Han Jin and the others, they all felt a bone-piercing chill. Woodrow's plan was complete, his thoughts were vicious, his plans were meticulous, his details were meticulous, and his foreshadowing were numerous. It was simply astounding. The 4 castellans took turns to take charge of the government affairs of Biteman City, the capital city. However, the position of the chief sheriff had always been held by Woodrow. He was very good at dealing with people and cleverly maneuvered among the castellans. He always showed his prestige and potential just right, and at the same time, appeared to be very well behaved and obedient. Therefore, no matter which castellan was in power, he would only try to build a good relationship with Woodrow so that he could gain the greatest benefits in Biteman City, and would never try to replace the chief sheriff. For more than 10 years, Woodrow had been striving for his ideal for more than 10 years. He had quietly extended his tentacles to various fields, and had never let anyone feel threatened by him. When the chief of Legion of Conrad was still alive, he often praised Woodrow, and the 4 castellans also had a good impression of Woodrow. When talking about Woodrow, almost everyone would say that Woodrow was a good man, a very good man. In fact, it was not a big deal that he could deceive the chief of Legion of Conrad, because a gentleman could be deceived in a proper way. However, if he could deceive those crafty old men, his cunning could never be underestimated. Han Jin and the others felt a bone-chilling coldness, not because of Woodrow's current strength, but because of his inhuman endurance. They felt as if they were looking at a venomous snake that was quietly lurking in the dark. Rudolph was Woodrow's confidant, and Woodrow had secretly chosen him as the future chief of Riptide. There was indeed a Biteman who had colluded with Zagund, and that was Woodrow. When the armies of the 4 castellans launched a counterattack, it would be the opportunity for Woodrow to launch an attack. He would seize the control of the 4 acropolises at one stroke. As for the capital city of Bite City, He had long been the uncrowned king there. Things had been made clear, and the reason was easy to understand. Zagund's former ally, Lord Malay, had shown signs of parting ways with Zagund. Zagund was eager to find a new ally, so he naturally hit it off with Woodrow. Everyone had seen the destructive threat of Zagund, but why couldn't Woodrow see it? This was even easier to understand, because this was his only chance to break away from Zagund after he had truly grasped the power. And Zagund didn't have any illusions about their future. All he needed was a period of rest and recuperation. What was even more surprising was that many people knew that Woodrow was a magician, but he rarely showed his real strength, nor did he have a chance to fight with others. People only thought that Woodrow was a warlock, or at most a sage. In fact, Woodrow was a 10th-level magician. When Leger turned over Borg's private part with a red-hot soldering iron, Borg not only shed some filthy liquid, but also leaked the top-secret information. After Rudolph was killed, his father, Chazos, should have been responsible for this matter. As the eldest son, Chazos was eager to do something big, but as the eldest grandson of the eldest son, Borg was even more anxious. After Woodrow became the Lord, who would be the worthy successor? They were willing to fight for this answer at all costs. Woodrow had been planning for his whole life, but now the secret had been leaked by his eldest grandson before he could even do anything. Although it was impossible to estimate the harm caused by this, it was undeniable that the significance of education was too important. As for other minor issues, they naturally reached a consensus. For example, how could Borg release the icicle spell in an instant? Who made those magic crystal cannons? Sassu had always been diligent, and with the help of Han Jin, he had now become a 6th-level warlock, which was already very surprising. Borg was obviously a playboy, so how could he become a 7th-level sage? Talent alone could decide everything? What should we do? Lang Ning asked softly. His eyes fell on Han Jin, because in comparison, Han Jin looked the most relaxed. Anyway, we're going to Black Raven City, so it won't affect us here. Han Jin paused. But Lang Ning said that we'll fight back in the future. Do you think it's better for the Bite Man to be controlled by the 4 Castellans, or for Woodrow to become the Lord? Of course it's better for the 4 Castellans to control it separately, Lang Ning said. That's easy. The 9th town is under the control of the West City. We can send someone to invite Winston, the Castellan of the West City, and let him see what we've seized with his own eyes. Let him ask Borg himself. He knows better than us what to do. Woodrow is a great magician. Sassu stuttered. Do you think Chazos will tell Woodrow these things? Han Jin laughed. Does he want to be replaced by other brothers? While he's trying to hide all this, we may have left long ago. Han Jin's words opened up everyone's mouth. As if the situation was not so critical, they all put forward various suggestions. Chapter 118. This was definitely a huge fortune that would make anyone jealous. Not to mention the seized fleet, Leger and Sassu also found the shipping point of the goods. They seized 3 large underground warehouses and found a lot of military supplies, which were all given to Rudolph by Woodrow. They were preparing for the future expansion of the army and war. Rudolph was killed, 9th town fell into Leger's hands, and the 4 Castellans were about to send troops to fight against Zagund. Time waited for no one. Chazos had no choice but to try to transport the military supplies out. Unfortunately, he gave the wrong person and ruined his plan. As for Morgan and Company, it was now Woodrow's property. Dismark in the Holy Crown City cleaned up the headquarters of Morgan and Company. When Woodrow heard the news, he followed suit and took over several branches of Morgan and Company. No matter the former or the latter, they all knew that this kind of thing was taboo and would arouse the disgust and hostility of other business groups. Dismark was forced to do it, and Woodrow had no other choice. Rebellion was supposed to go against the current, so it was inevitable to do something like drinking poison to quench one's thirst. However, Qili suffered a great blow. Fortunately, Han Jin and the others protected her and looked forward to the future for her. After occupying Black Raven City, she could rebuild Morgan and company there. Since her ancestors could create such a big situation, so could she. However, Han Jin and the others ignored the pressure on Qili. People could only mature faster under pressure and adversity. This saying sounded pretentious, but it was still reasonable. At dusk, everyone gathered together to chat. This was a habit that they had developed when they were on the move. They would spend some time chatting every day because they had nothing to do at that time. Now that they had settled down, this habit had become an inexplicable habit. Leger and Langny, who had joined later, had also adapted to the habit. It was undeniable that chatting could also improve the relationship between the members of the team. It could not be ignored. For example, Lei Zhe and Lang Ning had become very familiar with everyone and could joke around naturally. This was the effect of chatting. Han Jin sat at the table and flicked his finger. A black beetle about half the size of a melon seed quickly climbed up along the table. Raphael, don't waste your magic power. Morrison stared at the little beetle. Why don't you help me? I've already said it. Write down the lesson you've been taught. Write it 1,000 times and I'll cast another spell on you, Han Jin said without raising his head. Low chuckles sounded around them. This kind of request was nothing to Qili, but to Morrison's, it was enough to take his life. What are you laughing at? Morrison's raised his head and yelled. The moment he looked up, the little beetle jumped onto Morrison's without making a sound. Raphael, do you still not have enough magic power to cast that substitute spell? Sunir asked softly. Morrison's experience had greatly affected everyone. Previously, everyone was more or less suspicious of the effect of Han Jin's spell, but the facts had proven everything. What was a person with a dream most afraid of? It was a mistake. Mistakes in judgment, reactions, and so on. Mistakes could often lead to disastrous consequences or even death. Han Jin's spell gave everyone a chance to make up for their mistakes. There was nothing more precious than this in the world. Sunir had a special identity and was knowledgeable. Even she was looking forward to Han Jin's spell, let alone the others. Han Jin thought for a moment. Tomorrow should be enough. Morrison's suddenly became silent. The others also shut their mouths, their expressions complicated. When Han Jin was unable to cast the spell, or when they did not know the exact effect of the spell, everything seemed simple. But now, things had become complicated. There was only one spell for the time being. Who would benefit from it? To put it bluntly, who did not want to be protected by Han Jin? Accidents could happen at any time. Perhaps, because Han Jin did not choose them, they would die in an accident not long after. This had nothing to do with unity. There was no such thing as a complete altruist in the world. This was determined by the law of evolution. Morrison's pestered Han Jin every day to ask for magic buff. However, when he knew that Han Jin would be able to cast the spell tomorrow, he had a strange feeling in his heart. This was because Han Jin had only helped him before. No one else had received Han Jin's protection. If the spell was cast on him again, he would be very ashamed. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Han Jin sighed in his heart. In fact, he could already cast the faked Earth Corpse, but he was worried that something like this would happen. When it came to leading an army, he was definitely not as good as Lang Ning and Sunir. When it came to fighting skills, he was definitely not as good as Morrison's. When it came to human nature, Han Jin's understanding was much deeper than Sunir and the others. If a private investigator was hired for a matter, it would definitely be tricky or not. Han Jin had seen many strange and bizarre things. He was very clear that if it was handled well, everyone would be more united than before. If it was not handled well, there would be estrangement in everyone's hearts. In one word, it was difficult. Choosing to be an autocratic leader might be a good idea. The problem was that although his special magic and some misunderstandings had allowed his position to rise like a rocket, the time they had spent together was still too short for him to be a leader. That little beetle had already climbed onto Moxink's shoulder, but Moxink was thinking about something and didn't notice it at all. All of a sudden, the little beetle jumped and drilled into Moxink's ear. Morrison's was shocked. He quickly reached out to grab it, but the little beetle had already crawled into his ear. Morrison's fingers were very thick. They could not even be used to pick his nose, let alone his ear. Morrison's was so anxious that he slapped and scratched at the little beetle. After a while, he finally understood and looked at Han Jin with a bitter face. "A little beetle is difficult for a 7th-grade fighter like you?" Han Jin said with a half-smile. "Don't underestimate little things, understand? Is an ant small? But an ant can turn a 1,000-year-old tree into rotten wood, turn a tall building into ruins, and even make a dam burst. A little bit of selfishness and dissatisfaction might not sound like much, but it can destroy a team in the end. Take the incident a few days ago, for example. If Chazos did not have any selfishness and reported the news to Woodrow immediately, what would have happened? Sunir, Sasu Leger, and Lang Ning were not idiots. They immediately understood what Han Jin was trying to say. They looked at each other and smiled. Itchy. Morrison's did not have time to think. Han Jin smiled. The little beetle crawled out of Morrison's ear. Morrison's looked as if he had seen a demon and swept the little beetle to the ground. Sunir looked at the little beetle curiously and then bent down. But when she squatted down, the little beetle suddenly jumped up and bumped into her neck. It slid down her chest and slid into the soft armor. "Raphael!" Sunir covered her chest with her hands and shouted in a tender voice. Han Jin was stunned. With his personality, he would never take liberties with Sunir. Even if he wanted to, he would not do it in front of everyone. He originally wanted to let the little beetle jump onto Sunir's leg armor, but there was a time difference when using telepathic thoughts to control a Fae. Moreover, the little beetle was too small. Plus, he did not expect Sunir to suddenly squat down, so this happened. "I didn't do it on purpose," Han Jin hurriedly explained. "Let it out first. You are holding it so tightly. How can I let it out?" Even though she was wearing a mask, he could see that Sunir was gritting her teeth. If it was just a normal little beetle, Sunir would not be so serious. But Han Jin had just bragged that he could use the puppet monster's perspective to observe the scenery. This meant that wherever the little beetle ran to, Han Jin could see it clearly. It would be strange if Sunir let go. Ahem. Leger coughed. "I have something to do. Let's go out and talk." "I understand," Morrison's suddenly shouted. His face was full of wisdom. "I finally understand why Raphael made such a small puppet monster. Do you think Sunir and Chili would notice if there was such a little beetle in their room?" Don't talk nonsense." Han Jin glared at Morrison's. Seeing that Sasu and Leger were both surprised, he hurriedly explained, "Don't you think that this little puppet monster is very useful for scouting?" "Yes." Sasu and Leger nodded at the same time. Both of them said in a strange tone, "It is indeed useful for scouting." Morrison's added, "So is it scouting or peeping?" Han Jin was stunned and speechless for a moment. He suddenly realized that there was still a long way to go before he could make a decision. "Don't talk nonsense. Raphael is not that kind of person," Chili suddenly said. "I don't care if he is that kind of person," Sunir said word by word. "Let it out. Right now." She had a special identity and experience. Most of the people who knew her true face knew her identity. She had always been respected by others. No one dared to make fun of her or even pursue her. Because most men cared about their reputation, they were unwilling to be the toad who wanted to eat the swan's meat, in case they would be laughed at. As for those who didn't care about their reputation, It was hard for them to climb to a high position in this troubled world. Strength was the foundation. How could they improve themselves if they didn't care about their self-esteem? They had no chance or qualification to do anything. Because of the lack of similar experiences, Sunir didn't know what to do. She felt both ashamed and angry. Although she could see that Han Jin didn't do it on purpose, she had to protect her reputation. She was in a dilemma. Ah! Morrison's looked at Chile as if he had discovered a new continent. No, what's wrong? Chile blushed. At this moment, a soldier's voice came from outside the door. Young Marshal, there are some people outside the camp who want to see you. One of them said she was the granddaughter of Woodrow, the chief sheriff of Bite City. Chapter 119. When a woman in a long purple dress gracefully walked in, the farce in the room was over, and several people were sitting there calmly. Although Sunir felt embarrassed just now, she was wearing a mask all the time, so no one could see anything unusual about her. You are. Han Jin stood up with a smile, glancing at the woman and the guards behind her. The woman in the lead looked very dignified and elegant, but her guards were a bit strange. Each of them was wearing a full suit of heavy armor, with an iron cover over their helmet. They were dressed like knight, but now they were not in a battle, so there was no need to cover their faces with iron covers, which would make people feel uncomfortable. Are you Leger, young Marshal? The woman said in a stiff tone. My name is Gloria, the granddaughter of Woodrow, the chief magistrate of Bite City. Han Jin was stunned. While he was still in a daze, the woman called Gloria continued, 3 days ago, your cavalry attacked our family's caravan. Today I'm here to ask for an explanation. Hearing the woman's words, Han Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was not the plot he had planned. Given Woodrow's scheming mind, his son Chazos should have known something about him. It was normal for him to send someone to inquire about information, but it was impossible for him to reveal everything at once. At least, Borg was under strict control, and the other party had no way to know whether Borg had confessed or not, or how much he had confessed. Therefore, they would try every possible means to sound him out during the conversation. He replaced Leger because he was worried that Leger would give the game away. His plan was to pretend to be polite to the other party. No matter how far the conversation went, he would never reveal the fact that Borg had confessed. In this way, Woodrow would think that his plan was not leaked, and would not take drastic measures easily. He wasn't afraid of smart people, but he was afraid of fools. This kind of scene was somewhat strange. Han Jin had wanted to help the other party hide the truth, but the other party had explained everything clearly. That level of openness was second only to Borg, who had confessed. In some aspects, he was even worse than Borg. Back then, Borg had refused to reveal his origins, and it was only after the torture that he was forced to reveal it bit by bit. This woman, on the other hand, claimed that she was here to negotiate, but in the end, her first move was to strip him naked. Did she not know that the word awkward existed in this world? Now, it was impossible for Han Jin to feign ignorance. Trying to cover it up would only make it more conspicuous. Not only was Han Jin in a daze, but Leger, Sunir, Sasu, and the others were also in a daze. Leger even glanced at Han Jin. What was there to be nervous about against such an opponent? Seeing that she had gained the upper hand with a show of strength and intimidated everyone present, the woman's eyes flashed with a fierce glint as she slowly said, Also, my younger brother, Borg, should have been captured by you, right? I want to see him. If you didn't hurt him, you will feel lucky. If you hurt him, then you will be punished. Don't blame me for not reminding you. My grandfather, Chief Magistrate Woodrow, is a 10th-level magician. Han Jin looked at Sunir and the others, and Sunir and the others were also looking at him. He finally understood that the so-called dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the son of a mouse knows how to dig holes was absolutely wrong. Not to mention that Woodrow wasn't the leader yet. Even if he really controlled the entire Biteman, he would still have to consider the internal conflicts of the ruling class. At the very least, he couldn't go to the military camp and throw a tantrum, right? Shameless, Cheely suddenly said. This was understandable. Woodrow had snatched away the wealth that belonged to Morgan and Company, so she naturally hated him to the extreme. What did you say? The woman called Gloria raised her eyebrows and shouted sternly, Say it again. A pheasant desperately flapping its tail, trying to show off its beautiful feathers. Guess what everyone will see at this time? Morrison squinted his eyes. See what? Sasu asked curiously. ***. Morrison's had a heartless expression on his face. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Han Jean and Sunir couldn't help but laugh together. The woman called Gloria's face turned green and then white. In the end, she said coldly, It seems that you are determined to go against us. Let alone Woodrow, even your father, Chazos, doesn't know that you are here, right? Han Jean said in a sympathetic tone. He believed that even if Chazos was an extremely stupid son of a rich family, he wouldn't do such a stupid thing. As for the woman in front of him, her stupidity had reached an incomprehensible level. In the past, he had always heard people say that someone was dumber than a pig. He used to think that it was just an exaggeration, but now he knew that it was actually a fact that happened occasionally. The woman called Gloria ignored Han Jean. Her gaze was vicious. She only glanced at Morrison's and Sasu, who were laughing nonstop. She said word by word, You will pay for this. She was trying to engrave every word she said into the hearts of her enemies, or even into the depths of their souls. Therefore, she spoke very slowly, and her lips moved very forcefully. She looked like she was gnashing her teeth. She does look like her, Leger suddenly said. His words were incomprehensible, but when they followed Leger's gaze, they saw Gloria's blood-red little mouth. The crowd burst into laughter again. Morrison's was laughing so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. He even gave Leger a hard punch. Sunir and Cheely felt that these men were too rude. Although the joke was a little vulgar, they couldn't help but laugh. The woman called Gloria was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Han Jean was a little skeptical that she didn't understand what they were laughing at. Perhaps she was just angry because of the rude laughter. I hope you know what you have done, Gloria's voice was trembling. You have angered a true powerhouse. I can guarantee that you won't be able to withstand the anger of the 10th grade great magician, Mr. Woodrow. She only dared to come here because she was a 10th grade great magician. If Han Jean and the others didn't listen to her, her mouth would really become. Then go back and tell Mr. Woodrow that we hope to see his anger as soon as possible. If we wait until the bloody night, Gerald, arrives, he will have to vent his anger through other channels, Sasu said with a smile. He was very dissatisfied that the other party would use a 10th grade professional to scare people, so he brought up Gerald. However, these people seemed to be possessed. Ever since Morrison scolded them, they would mention that thing in less than 3 sentences. When the words Gerald came out, the bodies of the guards behind Gloria stiffened. Gerald was Dismark's #1 general and had a heavy killing record. As the saying goes, a person's name is like a tree's shadow. It was impossible for them not to be afraid. However, Gloria sneered, Bloody Night Gerald? Who does he think he is? Han Jean sighed and shook his head as he stood up. Although his temper had always been good, he really couldn't tolerate this kind of big-breasted and brainless woman. You do it. I'm going back to rest, Han Jean said to Leger. You said that you would negotiate, so you should be the one to negotiate. You're a man. You have to keep your word, Leger refused. Sigh. My stomach hurts from laughing. Morrison stood up lazily and suddenly shot forward. The great sword in his hand was like lightning as it slashed towards Gloria's neck. Moxink's attack was so sudden that Gloria and her guards didn't have time to react. It was not until Moxink's sword was already on Gloria's neck that the guards pulled out their swords and shouted, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Let go of our young lady!" Bastards! Morrison's didn't say a word. He only turned around and looked at Han Jin. Han Jin didn't say anything. Then, he snapped his fingers. Sassu waved his hand and a spike emerged from the ground. The guard who was attacked quickly retreated and dodged the spike. He didn't dare to fight back. He said coldly, "Master Leger, we are here to negotiate. If we can negotiate, we can continue. If not, we will leave. Don't you think it's too despicable to do this?" Han Jin remained silent. After a while, he said, "You can leave." Morrison's put away his greatsword and returned to his lazy appearance. The guards quickly surrounded Gloria and retreated step by step until they reached the door. Han Jin smiled. "Don't waste your energy. If I really wanted to hurt you, you wouldn't be able to escape even if you crawled on the ground." The guards glanced at Han Jin coldly, then turned around and left. "What? You don't want to make things difficult for these idiots?" Morrison's laughed. "Raphael, what's wrong? Your expression is not right." Leger was very attentive. "No matter what you do, it's best to be just right. Overdoing it will bring you trouble." Han Jin smiled. "Have you ever seen such a stupid woman?" "No." "You said that woman. There is something called the subconscious mind." Han Jin slowly said, "For example, if you are walking on the street and a carriage suddenly crashes into you, or if you care about your family or friends, you will use your fastest speed to dodge and protect them. Even after you are done, you won't know what you just did. If the carriage crashes into a stranger or someone you don't care about, your reaction speed will be much slower. And this is not something you can control. That is why it is called the subconscious mind." Leger, Sunir, and the others listened carefully to Han Jin's explanation. What Han Jin said was something they had never heard of before. Even if they had similar experiences, it was impossible for them to form a system of professional knowledge. When Morrisons attacked the woman, their reaction speed was too slow. Only when Sassu released the earth spike did their reaction speed pass. Han Jin paused. So what?" Morrisons asked curiously. "We should take action." "But," Sunir hesitated, "if there is really a problem here, then what is their goal? To let the woman tell us all the secrets?" "Secrets?" Han Jin smiled. How could a detective not know how to make deductions? When one's deductions reached a bottleneck, one had to come up with as many hypotheses as possible to find inspiration. If they already know everything that happened here, then is it still a secret? "You mean there is a spy in the camp?" Lang Ning suddenly stood up. "How long has Rudolph been here? How could he not have people supporting him?" Leger said in a cold tone. Chapter 121. In a small forest outside the 9th town, a group of black shadows gathered together. There were about a dozen people on one side and only one on the other side. "Sir, you shouldn't have come. Borg has already told us everything he knows." A man in the armor of the Riptide Regiment said in a low voice, "It's too dangerous for you to do this. If Leger and his men want to harm you, no one can save you. Cremont, you finally came out to see me?" The one who spoke was a soldier in full heavy armor. His voice was soft, and he was much shorter than the other soldiers. His voice was very sharp. Obviously, he was a woman. The woman who negotiated with Han Jin was now hiding behind the crowd. There was no room for her to interrupt. "Sir? What do you mean by that?" The man called Cremonti asked in astonishment. "I've been waiting for you for a whole day and night. What about you?" "Haha. Don't tell me you didn't see the signal we left." "Sir, it's not that I don't want to go out, but I can't," Cremont said anxiously. "The inspection is too strict. I just found a chance." "All right, I can understand you." The woman's voice suddenly became sharp. But what were you doing when Borg was about to transport our goods out of the 9th town? Do you know how much damage you've caused us? Sir, how can you blame me? Cremont said. Since Lang Ning came back, all the patrols and checkpoints were taken care of by the Knight of the 1st Cavalry Regiment. What could I do? When the 1st Cavalry Regiment set up the trap, I was still sleeping. I didn't even know what was going on when I heard the battle cries. Besides, I'm just a squadron leader. Even if they were going to do something, they wouldn't inform me in advance. If I really had the ability, would I have told Borg to go to Morrison's? I could have helped them transport the goods out by myself. We tried, but the 1st Cavalry Regiment only obeyed the orders of Leger and Lang Ning. They didn't care about the general of the 2nd Cavalry Regiment at all. The woman was silent for a moment and then said slowly, "How long did Borg last after he was caught?" "About half a day." "And then you told him everything?" "More or less. It's only been half a day, but the atmosphere in the camp has suddenly become tense." "Oh, it's worse than I thought." "Useless idiot," the woman said in a sarcastic tone. "Sir, since you've guessed that Borg would betray us, why are you still here?" Cremont was stunned. "I have no choice, I have to figure out their attitude." The female voice said slowly, "It seems that they don't want to go against us, and they have some misgivings about my grandfather. However, they don't seem to show any signs of moving closer to us." "What do they want to do? At this time, they should be on our side? That's why I'm curious." "Sir, what does Sir Siazwa mean?" "Chazos." The female voice sneered. "Out of politeness, I shouldn't speak ill of my elders." "But Uncle Siazwa, haha, his talent isn't much better than Borg's. When I asked them to do things, each of them was more stupid than the other. When I asked them to destroy everyone's efforts, they became outstanding geniuses." "Sir, there's something I don't know if I should say." Cremont sighed. "Go ahead." "Actually, Sir Rudolph isn't that talented." Cremont smiled bitterly. "He shouldn't have destroyed the honor of Knight of Conrad, and he shouldn't have dealt with Lang Ning. But he wouldn't listen to me no matter how hard I tried to persuade him. Since the death of Knight of Conrad, Lang Ning's reputation in the army is getting higher and higher. He's quick-witted, and strong-willed. He's an extremely rare general. Why don't we pull him to our side instead of trying to destroy him? Is Lang Ning really as powerful as you say? Then why was Rudolph able to get rid of him with just a little trick? If it weren't for Leger, Lang Ning would have been killed." "Sir, Lang Ning is a general. He's not good at these things." Cremont raised his voice a little, "but when it comes to fighting on the battlefield, none of us can compare with him. Sir, when His Excellency the Chief Sheriff takes action, we have to compete with the 4 Castellans on the battlefield. Do you really think you can defeat the armies of the 4 Castellans with this little trick? Do you really think you can control the Bite Man with only tricks?" "Tricks? What do you mean?" the woman said with displeasure. Cremont paused and sighed. "Sir, these are my heartfelt words. If I offend you in any way, please don't mind. However, I understand Sir Rudolph's idea. He wants to become a legion commander like the Knight of Conrad, so he wants to completely eliminate the influence of others in the legion. As for dealing with Lang Ning, Sir Rudolph can get the appreciation of His Excellency the Chief Sheriff only because of his loyalty. When it comes to the battlefield, can loyalty defeat the armies of the 4 Castellans? At that time, Lang Ning's brilliance will be unstoppable. Sir Rudolph is afraid that Lang Ning will get the attention of the Chief Sheriff and eventually replace his position. After we defeat the 4 Castellans, will we be satisfied with hiding in the Bite Man? If we expand outward, will we use Rudolph to command the war? He was just a dog that knew how to please his master and scare people with his teeth. What could he do? But Lang Ning is a sharp sword." Cremont didn't want to talk about this, but since he had already said it, he had to vent all his depression. Rudolph lost because of this. He tried every means to slander the reputation of the Legion of Conrad, which made the soldiers very dissatisfied. He also framed Lang Ning. This kind of dissatisfaction reached the extreme, so when he was killed, no soldier stood up to help him. The woman was silent for a long time and then said softly, "Forget it, it's already in the past. Don't mention it." Cremant showed a helpless look, and then seemed to think of something and said, "Sir, you must be careful of one person." "Who?" "Raphael." "How come? I've never heard of him?" "You should know that Leger has a good relationship with a mercenary group. It's said that when he was in danger, it was this mercenary group that saved him," Cremant said in a low voice. "Raphael is the leader of this mercenary group." The woman paused for a moment. "He's a magician?" "Not only a magician, but also a puppeteer, a priest, and a warrior." "That's impossible," the woman said in surprise. "Sir, it's the truth," Cremant said. "And he's very smart. I've never heard Lang Ning praise a person so much." "Just because of the praise? Sir, you—" Cremant suddenly closed his mouth and stepped back quickly. A silent arrow came out from the side and hit his shoulder. If he hadn't stepped back, the arrow would have been stuck in his chest. But at the same time, a shiny dagger appeared behind Cremonti's neck. The dagger was extremely fast, and Cremonti's retreating speed was not slow either. As a result, before he could react, the dagger had already pierced deeply into his neck. Cremonti's eyes suddenly became slack. He had already pulled out half of his sword, but it suddenly fell back, and his body softly fell down. Enemy attack! The dozens of black shadows drew out their weapons at the same time. A wooden giant appeared out of nowhere, opened its arms, and rushed towards the crowd. Behind the wooden giant was Han Jin with a murderous look. Morrison's rushed out from another place with his sword, but his behavior today was a little strange. He gritted his teeth and didn't say anything. If it was in the past, he would have shouted. It seemed that he had learned his lesson. If he wanted to fight, he wanted to fight. If he wanted to kill, he wanted to kill. Less nonsense. Han Jin, Morrison's, and Leger all fought in close quarters, but their styles were different. Morrison's was actually not slow, but he was not as fast as the other two. His specialty was his strength and his dazzling fighting power. On the other hand, Leger's body was like a ghost. He floated in the air, and his speed was extremely fast and tricky. He never made any slashing movements. The dagger in his hand was just a stab, and even a slight touch could take away a life. Han Jin's speed was not as fast as Leger's, and his strength was not as strong as Morrison's, but his efficiency was the highest. The wooden giant in front of him was unobstructed. It blocked the opponent's attack, attracted the opponent's attention, and blocked the opponent's vision. Then, Han Jin would close in, and with a single punch, blood would splatter out. Morrison's and Leger had to take care of the opponent's desperation, so that both sides would not be injured. Han Jin, on the other hand, was very relaxed. As long as the opponent could not destroy the wooden giant in an instant, his attacks would not miss. The short female soldier took a few steps back. No one knew what she had done, but a white fog of light suddenly appeared and enveloped her body. Han Jin and the others sensed that something was wrong and changed their direction at the same time, rushing toward the fog of light. Sunir's arrow, Morrison's fighting power, and Han Jin's wooden giant all passed through the fog, but they all missed. The short female warrior had already disappeared. Spatial scroll? Damn it! Morrison's, who had already made up his mind not to talk nonsense, broke the rule again. Leger's body suddenly twisted, and he dodged a sword that was coming down at him. He swung his dagger backward. This time, he attacked with hatred. The sharp dagger almost cut the warrior's neck. He did not expect, nor did anyone expect, that the other party would have a spatial scroll. This ambush was a complete failure. Ah! The woman in the field screamed and ran desperately into the forest. A mud wall appeared out of nowhere, and the woman was knocked back a few steps. She fell to the ground with her face facing the sky. Sassu walked out of the forest with a bitter smile. His mission was to kill the escapees, but who would have thought that he would only end up intercepting the most useless person? To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 122. After cleaning up the battlefield, everyone was in low spirits. They had to think about it seriously. Strategically, it was right to look down on the enemy, but tactically, they had to pay attention to the enemy. No wonder mages had a higher status than warriors of the same level. The 10th grade mage Woodrow was not here, but the influence he radiated could still determine the life and death of some people. Borg used the magic staff Woodrow made for him to kill Morrisons in an instant, and then the female warrior used a magic scroll to escape, leaving them disappointed. There was also the matter of spies in the army. They had to think carefully about countermeasures. If they were too strict, it would be bad for the morale of the army. If they were too lax, then they would no longer have any secret. Lang Ning was very busy. On one hand, he had to prepare for the expedition, and on the other hand, he had to contact the other generals of Riptide. On the other hand, Leger wanted to pull some people from the military law team to form a separate organization to deal with potential spies. Leger was not interested in military affairs, but he showed a certain degree of enthusiasm for this kind of thing. In comparison, Han Jin and the others were very relaxed. Those who were practicing swordsmanship did so, those who were meditating did so, and those who were secretly eating magic crystals ate as much as they could. One day, a soldier suddenly came to report that the castellan of the west side of the city, Winston, had arrived. Logically, Han Jin, Leger and the others should have gone out to join in the fun. However, the soldier reported that there was a person with an imposing aura beside Winston. It was a knight in heavy armor. Even the horses that were jumping around would avoid him when they saw him. Han Jin immediately thought of someone, Gerald. Now, no one dared to go out. It was not that they were afraid of Gerald. If thousands of knights swarmed him, he would be exhausted to death, but it was not necessary. The current situation was very complicated. Killing Gerald would only benefit Sigund and Woodrow. Han Jin's goal was to maintain the balance between them and let them continue to fight. Moreover, everyone's view of this bloody knight with a bad reputation had changed. Sunir used to hate Gerald because she had heard about his deeds. However, on that day, Gerald's imposing aura was fascinating. Facing the vampires that came like a dark cloud, he looked disdainfully and fearlessly. He held up the defense line of the west side of the city with only one person and one spear. That was a fierce battle. The cavalry brigade also received the battle report. Gerald was not only cruel to his enemies, but also to himself. At the most critical moment, he was besieged by a group of vampires, including the Ghost King Caroline. He was wounded several times, but he still refused to retreat. It was all because of Gerald that the governor of the west side of the city, Winston, was able to rebuild the defense line in a hurry and finally defeat the vampires. It was hard to deny that it was hard to find a completely evil person in the world. Even a butcher like Gerald had his shining points. It was said that after the vampires were defeated, the west side of the city was filled with cheers. Countless soldiers, including the residents of the west side of the city, regarded Gerald as their hero. Even in Gerald's hometown, the Holy Crown City, people were afraid of Gerald. Who would have thought that he would become a hero in people's hearts after he came to the west side of the Biteman City as an emissary? Sometimes things in the world were so funny. It was a pity that no one knew what Gerald was thinking at that time. Was he stunned? Did he not know whether to laugh or cry? Or was he moved? However, Winston came and left quickly. He only exchanged a few words with Lang Ning, checked the military supplies, and then left the camp in a hurry. Han Jin was confused at first. Was Lang Ning so trustworthy? But soon, he figured it out. Since Woodrow could plant his own people in Riptide, how could Winston not do anything? He must have his own people in the army. He must have known about these things long ago. He came to the camp just to verify it himself. The sun rose and set, and the moon waxed and waned. The 9th town became more and more lively. Troops came from afar and were stationed around the 9th town. Han Jin and the others could not get involved in some things. Now the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Battalion were familiar with them, but the soldiers of other troops would inevitably feel disgusted, especially the generals. They could obey Leger and Lang Ning, but if Han Jin wanted to stand in front of them and give orders, it would be very unpleasant. Therefore, Han Jin never asked about the affairs of the army. As long as Lang Ning was there would be no trouble. He put all his energy into cultivation. At the beginning, he could only absorb dozens of yuan of energy a day. But now, the energy he absorbed every day was calculated in terms of armor, which was thousands of times more than before. During these days, he had absorbed more than half of the more than 500 level 3 magic crystals of Earth element. The inconspicuous black raven magic crystals had all been used up, so there was a space in the space ring. But he did not make the 5 ghosts carrying spell. Just like he wanted to accumulate all the fire elements to make the 3 true fire charm, he hoped to release more advanced, dark magic in the future. Now, he still had 2 magical crystals of the Earth Bear and 2 magical crystals of the Tree Demon in his spatial ring. Although they were all Earth-type magical crystals, they were still relics of magical beasts of the 8th rank. There was too much energy in them. She just had a good impression of him and was curious about him. Han Jin's appearance was very handsome in the human world, but compared to the elves, he was very ordinary. Therefore, Sunir didn't care about his appearance. She thought that Han Jin was very smart but not scheming. He treated his companions with sincerity. He had a sense of justice but was not pedantic. When he could save people, he would help, and when he should kill, he would not hesitate. In fact, in this troubled world, it was already very good that he could trust, take care of his companions, and never betray them. Especially that day, when they were surrounded by the Knight of the Holy Crown City, Han Jin insisted on staying and let them go first. She still couldn't forget that lonely and stubborn back of Han Jin. Although she knew later that he could escape, his back was engraved in her heart, and that was why she liked him. As for her curiosity, it was easy to understand. The magic released by Han Jin was so perfect that she had never heard of such magic in the world. She had asked Stilberg several times about Han Jin's past, but Stilberg just kept smirking and didn't say anything. When she was pushed, he would yell and ask Sunir to ask him herself. Sunir couldn't do anything about it. However, curiosity was the most important thing between a man and a woman. Only curiosity could arouse interest, and only with interest could the future be created. It was hard to imagine what kind of story could happen between a man and a woman who didn't even have the slightest curiosity about him. Unfortunately, Sunir didn't understand this. However, in this small team, everyone's attitude was somewhat inexplicable. For example, Lang Ning, did he need to explain what he was doing here? Thinking of this, Sunir felt a little angry. Because of her affection and curiosity, she didn't reject Han Jin. Because of her character and identity, she wouldn't take the initiative to do anything, or to make someone happy. To break this situation, only Han Jin could take the initiative. But Han Jin seemed to be too careless. If he didn't mean anything else, why did he do those embarrassing things that were full of ambiguity in the eyes of others? If he had that kind of intention, why didn't he ask her to go out or buy her a small gift? Sunir certainly wouldn't covet those things. She just did it for a feeling. What's the matter? Sunir asked softly. She was already prepared. As long as Han Jin expressed his feelings seriously, even if it was very subtle, she would give Han Jin a chance. This man was very good in all aspects. He was responsible. His strength was probably the weakest among the elite members, but he always tried to protect others. He was ambitious. At least, Sunir had never thought of becoming a lord. He was smart. The current situation was created by Han Jin. He had many other advantages. Most importantly, he had a future. When she shared that secret with him, she already knew that as long as Han Jin was given time, his future would be unimaginably strong. Of course, Han Jin also had his shortcomings. He would always go to the bar with Morrisons. But all men were the same. She just needed to take care of him and change his bad habit. Sunir's face suddenly turned red. What was she thinking? Fortunately, under the cover of the mask, no one could see that she was different. It's like this. Han Jin smiled. My magic crystals are almost used up. So be it. What does it have to do with me? Sunir was extremely disappointed. She couldn't help but say coldly. Ah. Han Jin was stunned. I've been coding until 3 o'clock. I really can't do it anymore. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Please forgive me. But it should be today. Chapter 123. With a bang, the door closed in front of Han Jin. He was stunned for a moment, then helplessly turned around and saw Morrisons, Sassu, and the others smiling at him. Which one of you made Sunir angry today? Han Jin asked with a frown. Actually, it was normal for friends to have some unhappiness because of a moment of carelessness or carelessness. However, it was quite depressing for him to be implicated. No. Morrisons shook his head in surprise. No? Then why did it become like this? Han Jin pointed at the closed door. Did you make her angry? Morrisons yelled. I only said one sentence to her. How could I make her angry? And we were talking about something serious, Han Jin said. Aha! Moxink winked at Han Jin. Although he was smart, he always did stupid things. But if he was stupid, he should be the first one to catch Han Jin's faulty wording. So you always talked about improper things with her before? Moxink asked. F***ck off. Han Jin said angrily. If Sunir heard this, he would be in trouble. Tsk. Morrisons smacked his lips. He wanted to say something, but Han Jin did look angry, so he could only swallow his words. At this moment, Stillberg walked in from outside. Han Jin was eager to change the topic, so he waved his hand and signaled for Stillberg to come over. Young master, what's the matter? Stillberg's face lit up as soon as he saw Han Jin. Han Jin suddenly froze. In the past year, he rarely cared about Stillberg. It was not that he had forgotten about the relationship between the master and servant, but that he should have focused on his own cultivation and the relationships between the elite members. Moreover, they were going through one crisis after another, so he did not have time to think too much. Looking back, he clearly remembered the scene of Stillberg begging for a piece of bread, kneeling on the ground like a dog. He could not help but feel ashamed. He then asked gently, Stillberg, haven't you been learning magic from Sassu? How is it now? Stillberg could not help but look at Sassu. He did not know how to answer. Raphael, are you kidding? Sassu smiled bitterly. What's wrong? He only learned meditation techniques from me, and also learned how to release small fireballs. After that, he never looked for me again. Sassu said slowly, do you think that with a ready-made teacher like you, he still has a need to learn from others? Han Jin was stunned. He understood the meaning behind Sassua's words. If they were both learning magic, then should he learn normal magic from Sassu, or should he learn the extremely special magic from Han Jin? This was a very simple question. Anyone with a brain would not choose the former. Moreover, Morrisons and the others often talked about Han Jin, and praised Han Jin's magic. Stillberg's ears were getting calluses from hearing it. You want to learn magic from me? Han Jin smiled. Stillberg looked at Han Jin timidly. After a long while, he finally gathered his courage and nodded. "Come with me, young master," Stillberg said with a trembling voice. Seeing Han Jin like this, he could not believe that his dream had come true. "What are you waiting for? Come with me." With tears bursting out of his eyes, Stillberg was so happy that he almost fainted. He hurriedly followed Han Jin. He agreed just like that? Morrisons looked at the backs of Han Jin and Stillberg, and suddenly patted Sasua's shoulder. "Sasu, I want to learn magic from you too." "You want to learn magic? Are you crazy? You're so stupid. I can learn for a few days and then like today we—" "Spare me," Sasu smiled bitterly and interrupted Morrisons. "You think Raphael will care about you? That's none of your business. Are you going to help me? Go away." While Moxink and Cessation were quarreling, Han Jin had taken Stillberg into his room. Although they met every day, they always talked about trivial things, and it was always Stillberg who took the initiative, such as, "Young master, it's time for dinner, your robe is dirty, take it off, please go to bed later, I haven't lit the fireplace yet," and Han Jin hardly cared about Stillberg's well-being, because he was always busy doing something important. "Young master, it's time for dinner. Young master, your robe is dirty, take it off. Young master, you can sleep later, I haven't lit the fireplace yet." To Han Jin, his priority was to protect himself and his companions. He wanted to establish a foothold in this world as much as possible. To Stillberg, Han Jin was his master. He was the meaning of his existence. Ever since he started learning how to speak, the environment around him had been instilling a kind of thought into him. Loyalty had already merged with his soul. "Sit here." Han Jin pointed at a chair. Stillberg sat down and looked at Han Jin eagerly. Han Jin pondered for a moment and reached out to grab Stillberg's wrist. However, Stillberg's heart was beating too fast, like a drum. Han Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why are you so nervous? Relax, relax." "Young master, I'm already very relaxed," Stillberg whispered. Han Jin said helplessly, "How about this? Don't you know how to meditate? Start meditating now. I also need to think about where to start teaching you." "Understood, young master." Stillberg nodded vigorously. Seeing Stillberg close his eyes and meditate seriously, Han Jin suddenly realized that he had agreed too quickly. Should he teach him how to eat and cultivate? Actually, it wasn't impossible. However, there were some key points that he simply couldn't explain to Stillberg. For example, the circulation of the sky, the acupoints, and the artistic conception. If he couldn't even explain these basic knowledge, how could he let him cultivate? Stillberg didn't know what Han Jin was thinking at the moment. Although he looked like he was meditating, he was actually very excited. After such a long time, the young master had changed from an unknown and destitute little aristocrat to the current Raphael. Stillberg had seen all the changes and unfamiliarity. However, in his heart, the young master would always be the same young master. No matter if he was destitute or rich, weak or sick, or able to resist an army of thousands, one thing would never change. Raphael was Stillberg's young master forever. However, the only thing that made Stillberg sad was that the young master had never mentioned those changes to him. This made him feel like he was being excluded by the young master. The others had asked him more than once where the young master had learned his skills from, but he had always vaguely brushed them off. In fact, Stillberg knew that the young master really didn't know anything in the past. That kind of begging life, Stillberg hadn't forgotten until now. But so what? "I will never tell anyone about the young master's decadent days," Stillberg said in his heart. Now, the young master was finally going to teach him magic. This was a secret that the young master had never shared with anyone. Thinking of this, Stillberg couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. Han Jin pondered for a long time, but still gave up the idea of teaching his own cultivation method to Stillberg. Instead, He picked out a set of introductory foundational cultivation method from his memory that was easier to learn. As long as Stilberg could seriously practice according to this method, after his body had the true essence, it would be much easier to use the talismans he made. At present, this was the only way. Han Jin clearly knew that once the things he knew were leaked out, it would have a great impact in this world. Whether the impact was good or bad, it wasn't something that Han Jin wanted to see at present. Calling Stilberg, who was thinking nonsense, Han Jin carefully imparted the cultivation method to him. For example, the meridians, Han Jin could only explain it as the channels through which the sacred elements moved in the body. During this time, Stilberg also had doubts. He knew about the elements, but what was the sacred element? Of course, he didn't dare to ask. Whatever the young master taught him, it must be something good. Whatever, as long as he followed the young master's instructions, everything would be fine. Regardless of Stilberg's perseverance and constitution, on this first day, he showed a kind of fanaticism. He even forgot whose room he was in, just closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. Outside the room, the curious Morrisons and Sassu hadn't left yet. They casually leaned against the wooden pillars and whispered to each other. Little Joseph also came to the yard, occasionally glancing at Han Jin's room. Because of his age, little Joseph was not scheming. His thoughts were shown on his face. "Come here." When little Joseph passed by the yard for the fourth time, Morrisons waved his hand. Little Joseph hurried to Morrisons. Morrisons looked him up and down and said softly, "You also want to learn Raphael's magic?" Little Joseph was a little flustered. "Think about it. Didn't you always want to learn swordsmanship? No one taught you back then. What's wrong with you now? Are you looking down on warriors? Are you sure you have the potential to learn magic?" Morrison said in a muffled voice, "Don't be too greedy. Just learn swordsmanship from me." Speaking of the relationship between Han Jin and Stilberg, Morrison's was the one who knew best. It was normal that Han Jin was willing to teach Stilberg magic, but it was almost impossible that little Joseph wanted to learn it too. Little Joseph was disappointed at first, but Morrison's next words had a big impact on him. Greedy. He didn't know anything. Everyone took care of him like a child. No one had ever asked him to do anything. Little Joseph's face reddened at the thought. His eyes became clear again, and he said seriously, "Morrison's University bro, I understand. Today was too uncomfortable. My head was heavy, and I couldn't get up during the day. I apologize to everyone. I will do it if I can, but I really can't today. I can't continue writing the next chapter." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.